With a mission to deliver fiscally responsible, highly dependable services to the citizens of our community and the region with integrity and professionalism, this is the City of Albany Commission Meeting with Mayor Bo Duro, Mayor Pro Tem John Howard, Ward 1, Matt Fuller, Ward 2, BJ Fletcher, Ward 3, Chad Warbington, Ward 4, Bob Langstaff Jr., Ward 5, Demetrius Young, Ward 6, City Manager Sharon Subadale, City Clerk Sonia Talbot, and City Attorney Nathan Davis. This is the City of Albany Commission Meeting.
Good morning. Call to order the work session, June 16th, 2020. The first item on the agenda, I believe, is the call to order. Madam Clerk.
If she's talking, we can't hear her.
Okay. Committee to hold public hearing regarding FY 2021 proposed budget.
We have 3 speakers signed up. I don't know if they're intend to address the budget or some other matters, but I would suggest that we just proceed to hear the speakers before we go hear from Mr. Brown. Is that agreeable with the commission? Anybody have any objection to that? Okay, the first speaker signed up is Mr. Mark Meager. Good morning. Are you there, Mr. Meager? Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Kelly has corrected me, suggested that we call the roll. Is that good morning, Mr. Meager?
Good morning.
Could we call the roll, Ms. Kelly?
Here. Yeah, Ward 4 here.
Here.
I saw Commissioner Young.
Yeah, I'm here. She still has her thing on mute, so I couldn't hear her call.
Commissioner Young, I think you might be muted. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I'm here.
You can hear him? Okay. We will return. Can we proceed with the speakers, Ms. Kelly? Mr. Meager, you're the first speaker that signed up. Can we have Mr. Meager on the screen?
I'm right here.
Mr. Meager, we ask that you hold your comments to 5 minutes. Is that agreeable?
That's not a problem.
Is that agreeable?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, everyone hears you at this time. Please go ahead.
So do you want me to begin?
Yes, sir. No, I'm
Okay.
ready.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Mark Meager. I've been a resident of Albany for 43 years. My wife and my daughters were all born and raised here, so we have a long family ties to this community. And as a taxpayer, I'm usually concerned about the city spending too much money on projects and equipment designed to make Albany look progressive and look up to date. It seems that when it comes to those matters, the attitude is we should spare no expense when it comes to parks and trails and museums and fancy signs and fire trucks and police cars and downtown hotels and businessmen. But the heart and soul of Albany is its people, and that includes city employees that do the boots on the ground work for the citizens of Albany. There's one area that I, as a taxpayer, do not mind paying taxes for, and that is for our first responders. I was pleased to hear the proposed 6% pay raise for the Albany Police Department, but I was curious why our other first responders were not included in that raise request. Under the current pandemic, they risk their lives just as much as our police, and I think they need to be recognized for their efforts as well. Back in May 2018, a proposal was passed by the City Commission to implement a merit pay raise system. A WALB report in May 18, 2020 stated that the merit raise system would help find and retain the highest performing employees. That was the objective. It all sounded good, and it worked well for the employees pay grade 11 and higher. But for the boots on the ground employees pay grade 10 and below, it was a complete joke. It was poorly crafted, poorly executed. In the end, the 11s and up got the lion's share of the merit raises. The inequities created and the dozens of grievances filed over the past 2 years as a result have not yet been addressed by the City Commission or city management, particularly when it comes to the Albany Fire Department. Now, Albany has what I consider the finest fire department in the state. In 2015, their hard work, their achievements got the Albany fire rating raised from a class 3 to a class 2. That rating helps all homeowners in Albany with their fire insurance. It was said the APD that a 6% raise was needed for the police department because there's a shortage of police officers, and we needed to make Albany police pay commensurate with other cities in Georgia. We are just as short of manpower in the fire department. Their starting pay for a firefighter in Albany is lower than Lee County, Carroll County, and Mitchell County. So should not the same standard apply? Traditionally, and I want to emphasize this, traditionally Albany has always given raises to all first responders together. So why is this year an exception? Especially given that we're in a pandemic and our first responders are the most exposed. I can tell you that many in the Albany Fire Department feel they do not have a voice in city government that speaks for them. That's why this past January, 83 of our firefighters voted to join the International Association of Firefighters, a union. Now, normally I'm against unions for government employees, but in this case, I can understand their reasons. I know the union is not officially recognized, but I encourage each of you to talk to their representatives and hear what they have to say. They are not asking for any special consideration over any other department in the city. They just want a voice that can be heard. The city of Albany can spend $2.1 million to buy 3 fire trucks considered the Cadillac of pumper trucks. Why can't it spend a little bit more to retain and maintain the Cadillac of firefighters themselves? That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Meager. Does any commissioner have any questions for Mr. Meager? Commissioner Warburton?
Mark, you mentioned the starting pay of some of the surrounding counties. Are they on the same 24, 48? I think our firefighters on the 56-hour pay scale. So is it true apples to apples when you talk about those other cities or counties around us?
I haven't checked that, to be honest with you, Chad. There could be some differences in the actual scheduling, but I just find it interesting, that we've got what I consider is the best. We've had the best fire department for as long as I can remember, and they got us the best fire rating, I think, in the state of Georgia. We're right there with Atlanta and many of the other major cities when it comes to a fire rating. And I just think that needs to be recognized. But I can't really say as far as the actual hours worked and what other amenities the Albany Fire Department might have over Lee County or Mitchell County or Carroll County. I was just told that the starting pay is higher in Lee County, which seems kind of odd.
Yeah, so I don't know if the city manager can respond to that or if that's a follow-up, but certainly, I would like to respond to the statement that you made as well as to see if it's apples to apples. So whether it's responding here or follow-up, I'd like just some clarification with that.
I'll provide a follow-up.
Ms. Subban?
I'll provide a follow-up.
Oh, at a later date?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Meager? The next speaker is Ms. Cheryl Bird. Is Ms. Bird on the line? Thank you, Mr. Meager.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Yes, this is Sherelle Burke. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this morning. I speak on behalf of Sawega Rising, representing the voice of African Americans who you took an oath to represent in the city of Albany, Georgia. I first want to invite you to participate in the celebration of freedom of the ancestors of the majority of the people that make up this city. This weekend, we will celebrate Juneteenth, and we're very grateful for the city's support of this event. This weekend will begin with a virtual town hall about racism and defunding the police on Thursday at 6 p.m., followed by a day of healing and candlelight vigil on Friday night at 7 p.m., and a protest, march, and rally on Saturday beginning at 10 a.m. Invitations have been sent to each of your emails. We will practice social distancing and encourage everyone to wear masks. Masks will be provided for those who do not have one. Mayor, I commend you for the passionate speech that you made at the last City Commission regarding the plight of African Americans in the city you took an oath to serve. But until those words are supported with policy and dollars, they are empty promises. I've taken a moment to review the proposed 2020-2021 budget. It troubles me that in a $290 million budget, we have allocated 34% of those funds to the police and only 12% of those funds to building up the youth in this community. For African Americans, this translates that you are more concerned with criminalizing our community than you are with building up our community. This commission is serving a community comprised of 77% African American citizens. Yet we have Black elected officials in Albany. Yet we have had Black elected officials in Albany. We've had Black mayors, chiefs of police, politicians, superintendents, city managers, etc. And because of this, it's easy for many of you to think that we do not have a problem with racism in our community. Let me illustrate how racism is woven into the structure of this community. Structural racism determines the value of your home based on the color of your neighbors. Structural racism determines how severe a punishment you'll receive for a crime. Structural racism determines whether or not the potholes in your street will be repaved or patched with a blacktop and a shovel. Structural racism determines the likelihood that eminent domain may be used to carve out parts of your property for the benefit of a pipeline or compressor station. Structural racism determines how many voting machines will be available at your neighborhood precinct. Structural racism determines whether or not your children will have a liquor store next to a neighborhood school. Structural racism will determine if you have access to a full-service grocery store in your community or a collection of dollar stores. Structural racism is tearing down African American historic places and landmarks while preserving Confederate street names and monuments. In 2020, Albany, Georgia still has the highest rates of food insecurity, HIV rates, Black maternal deaths, crime, incarceration, unemployment, underemployment, and yes, in 2020, the highest rates of COVID-19 in the nation, which all impact African Americans the most. So when we tell you what we need, listen to us. When we say that liquor stores in our neighborhoods are dangerous to us, listen. If we say that we need a disadvantaged business center to close the economic gap between whites and African Americans, listen. When we ask you to not criminalize clothing to keep our children from being put into the incarceration system, listen. If we ask you to defund the police and to allocate those resources to invest in programs for our youth and community, do not put more funding in police and personnel, listen. If we say we want you to recognize Juneteenth as a local holiday, listen. And if you, as a political leader of a predominantly African American community, are not able to bring yourself to utter the words Black Lives Matter, should you really be leading this city? We request the opportunity to have a focused conversation with all of you on racial equity and healing and the path forward for our community within the next few days. Let us all be on the right side of history this time and show the world that Black lives do matter in Albany, Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Next is Professor James Pratt. Professor Pratt, you on the line? Oh, I'm sorry. Did any commissioner have any questions for Ms. Byrd? Mayor Pro Tem?
Ms. Byrd? Ms. Sherrill?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, Commissioner Howard.
Fine, how you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
All right. Thank you for enlightening us on the issue that you brought up. And unfortunately, I would love to participate in the June 19 events that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But because of some underlying health problem, I think it would be in the best interest of me not to attend, but I certainly wish you well and your organization and those that participate this coming weekend.
Thank you. I do understand, Commissioner Howard. What's more important to us is a follow-up conversation with all of you. So if you cannot be at the events, we hope that you'll grant us the opportunity to have a focused conversation about racial equity and healing. So
Most likely I will.
Any other commissioner have any questions for Ms. Byrd?
No questions, but I just want to thank Ms. Byrd for her comments. I think the events that are planned for this weekend are very important to the community. And we appreciate your help and the other members of the coalition to bring these events about. And let me just have you make clear that the events are open to all, not just, you know, African Americans or the African American community, but open to all.
That is correct. This is a community event. This is something that we want to see unite our community. So no, this is not just a Black event. We in Albany, Georgia have to come to a place in which we celebrate all diversity and all races in our community. So that means, yes, we need everyone to show up and support the majority of the community here in this Juneteenth event. We've seen other marches that have happened in this community that have been on a smaller scale, but everyone is looking for a unified march. And so we're inviting our white allies, our Hispanic allies, everyone to come out and to participate and celebrate the heritage of this community. So thank you for pointing that out. All are welcome and all are invited.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, we have Professor James Pratt. Is Professor Pratt?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Duro and commissioners. I'm just echoing Sherrill Byrd's points. I think she laid out the context we're in Albany today and have been historically. This is an important meeting because we're talking about funding the police and funding what could increase public safety here in Albany, given our history of high crime rates. And so building on Sherrill's context, some of the solutions can look like, at this moment, thinking about hiring 2 psychologists and social workers using public safety funds, particularly given the state decrease of about $130 million in public health funds. Because if we're about public safety, we will focus on preventative measures. Other solutions look like not putting a community policing precinct on the south side and the east side, because the research shows that increased interaction with police often leads to more criminalization of these neighborhoods. What we need is more community centers that devote to the holistic community, building collective efficacy so we can move forward. Some of the things that we've talked about before. In addition, the city can today and unequivocally today say Black Lives Matter and recognize Juneteenth as a holiday. This is a cultural move that would demonstrate a progressive move forward that truly demonstrates a connection with the community and the city and builds a certain level of trust that the city claims it needs in order to make our citizens safe. These are things that even our chief of police has mentioned that the police can't do it all. And so not only should you be listening to your citizens, we should be listening to our experts. As a criminologist, having studied the advent of community policing and how it in part led to mass incarceration in many of our African-American communities, we must realize that we have to be innovative and lead the way. There are in fact models for new models of policing and public safety, including places like Minneapolis and other cities around the nation and even globally. In addition, we have to realize that racism is structural and systemic, and that it's not a one-time event. And so keeping this in mind, the city should give funds to creating a racial reconciliation and healing commission, similar to what Sherrill mentioned, or Ms. Byrd mentioned. in order to continually explore these issues and devote funds to truly changing the image and the culture of this community to ensure that we prevent crimes on the front end. We know that many crimes, as we've talked many times in the gang task force meetings that Commissioner Howard and others have attended, we know that gangs and criminal activity come from often poverty, lack of access to resources. So we have to do, again, the work on the front end, use the resources, use parts of that 34% of the budget that's going to policing and these raises to hire new people that can actually bridge the gap. In addition, if we are going to increase funds to policing, there has to be access or clearer access to who's on the payroll. Because when you go to the policing website, when you go to the city's website, it's very difficult to find who are our officers, who are the people protecting our community. And so access and information has to be there as well. And these are some of the things that we're proposing as interim solutions until we can do the deeper dive and do the work to create coalitions around how we do liquor stores here in Albany, given the continual issue we have with liquor stores in this area and how it influences crime rates. We have to face dealing with racist structures in this city that make people feel like they're not part of the community. These are things that the city commission can agree to today. So I ask each of you today, will you be willing to celebrate and recognize Juneteenth as a holiday? Will you be willing to rethink policing and public safety and really invest in the things that we know empirically and historically can ensure a safer society and that deals with homelessness, that deals with poverty? Will you today get rid of racist holidays like Columbus Day and celebrate voting and elections? These are moves that you can answer today and unequivocally say yes to, not only based on a citizen's opinion, but based on an expert, based on the research, based on examples, based on morals and ethics. And today you can unequivocally do this, particularly given this critical moment in our country and given the words that the mayor and other commissioners have said and demonstrated in the weeks following these brutal murders across the nation. I'm welcome to any questions, but I would love to hear a yes from each of you, and I think it's possible because I believe that you all believe that Black Lives Matter, and you believe the research, and I feel like you all can do it and make us a good life city, truly.
Thank you, Professor Pratt. Any questions for Professor? Any questions for Professor Pratt? Professor Pratt, I would like to, you mentioned that there's some research that shows community policing, I think you said, led to mass incarceration. If you could show me some literature that shows that community policing did indeed cause or contribute to increased incarceration, I would certainly like to see that.
I would be glad to give you a dossier on the research around it.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, I was kind of waiting for it to go around. I was going to make a comment. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Pratt. Can you just give us a little bit on the defunding the police movement? I know there's a lot of questions and actually a lot of misinformation around what's being discussed nationwide in terms of defunding the police. But can you kind of make that a little bit more clear for the public in your capacity as a criminologist?
Certainly, Commissioner. So the defunding the police movement is not a new movement. It's been around since 30s, 40s, and even before, given the history of policing, given the systemic issues with policing, because we know that reform often reinforces the institutions that we want to change that are dangerous. So that's the kind of background that it's coming from. But defunding the police is about using the data to evaluate what are the underlying issues in the communities that are suffering, that have these high crime rates. And we know, just like a disease, like mental health and other diseases, there are comorbidities. And so poverty, health outcomes, cultural issues, racism, fear of immigration, all of these kind of things, psychological and mental health access, all of these things create an environment that can be criminogenic, that leads to more crime, including bad policy like saggy pants ordinance, like criminalized marijuana. So those contexts lead to more crime. And oftentimes we find that in those same communities, over policing also creates a larger gap between the community and the people that are supposed to be protecting. So the defund the police movement is all about hiring the right people to do those jobs. So when you're having a domestic violence dispute, you have someone that is good, that is trained and specialized in marital and de-escalation techniques that can really deal with those situations instead of sending both people to jail or leaving them at home or just separating them and recreating the cycle or delaying the inevitable. So it looks like having social workers that maybe patrol different areas around schools that work with kids that may be truant rather than locking them and their parents up. So it really looks at building networks and networks of trust and creating those kind of cushions around society and really building up individuals rather than criminalizing them and putting them in jail for doing something deviant. And so that's what that defunding the police movement looks like. It does look like taking funds for police because we know, as the chief has said before, as other city leaders have said, police aren't trained to do certain things. And so while we may have investigators, while we may have immediate response units for the most severe and violent crimes, it looks like changing the law, changing the resources, and hiring the right people to do the right jobs. And what the city of Albany can do is evaluate the number and the types of calls they get so it can be a more direct targeting of who to hire, why, and where. But in the interim, 2 psychologists and 2 social workers may be a good move along with some other folks.
And under the context of the budget hearing, which this is supposed to be, can you talk about the defunding the police movement and specifically the budget aspects of that?
Certainly. I would argue that $2 to $4 million can be used both to create the study that examines where those calls go, and in the interim, as that study is being produced, as we evaluate and go through the data with a commission of some sort, the city can hire, again, 2 social workers and 2 psychologists that are focused on de-escalation because of the rates of domestic violence in this community, and mediation, particularly for gangs, given the nature of gangs in this community and gang and youth violence. So those are some stopgap measures that can be used as we move forward and truly evaluate, because we have a long way to go to truly get the system and network that we need. But ultimately, what that looks like is creating a whole new department, right? Maybe even combining APD and DCPD, or creating a whole new unit that rethinks what crime and social safety looks like. You may have investigators and a set of social workers and sociologists and a network of people that look holistically at the problem of crime. And so that's the ultimate goal of defunding the police, is truly creating a new institution that really deals with public safety in the ways that we already know we need to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pratt. The next item is the budget discussion. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? I think. Okay, is Ms. Glass on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning, Ms. Glass.
Good morning.
What'd you say, Commissioner Warburton?
If you follow the agenda, we're on letter A.
Okay.
And letter B is the discussion.
I see that now, but I think we let the speakers come in. That was what I asked initially. So since Ms. Glass is signed up, actually she signed up before the 3 speakers, we'll just go ahead, if y'all don't have any objection, and let Ms. Glass address the commission. Is that fair enough?
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
is the public hearing still open? Did you close the public hearing?
Okay. I guess that would be the appropriate, with having heard from these 3 speakers, that concludes the public hearing. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Okay. Now, we'll hear from Ms. Glass. Good morning, Ms. Glass.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for
Fine,
the time. My name is Dana Glass. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the CEO for Aspire Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And we are your safety net provider for behavioral health, substance abuse, and developmental disability services here in Albany. We also serve 7 counties that touch this particular area. And what safety net provider means is that we are tasked by the state of Georgia to serve those that are uninsured or underinsured. And I just wanted to give you a quick update on the impact we've been having in the community so far this year. We run on fiscal year, and so our data that I'm going to share with you is from July 1, 2019 through May 31st, 2020. And so far through that time period, we have served 5,300 Dougherty County residents. 55% of those are male and 45% female. In addition to that number, we've also served 70 intellectual developmentally disabled adults through day services and residential. We have about a 70-30 split between our service to adults and our service to children. We serve approximately 68% African American, 30% Caucasian. Our biggest age group that we serve is that 18 to 40, which is 36% of our service base. We do provide a complete continuum of care to adults and children in this 8-county area. Our highest level of care is our Behavioral Health Crisis Center, which is 24/7 walk-in access to care. We also provide group and family and individual therapies. We give medications. We have a medication-assisted treatment program for opioid dependence. We are in the school systems. We have an after-school program. We also have really low level of care, such as case management or just medication management services. Here in Albany, 70% of our appointments are kept with the individuals that we are serving, which equates to over 82,000 direct service contacts with individuals. We're really proud of that. That's a lot of clinical care that we've been able to provide. We also maintain full operations during this pandemic. Within a matter of days, we essentially turned our system on its head and went from in-clinic face-to-face, in-community face-to-face services to about 70% of our services being delivered via telehealth. Another program that we're really proud of here in Albany is our Change Center, which is an addiction support recovery center. It was the first of its kind in Southwest Georgia. It's 100% peer-led by individuals in long-term recovery. They have served over 2,200 individuals, and they've also provided about 13,000 episodes of recovery support services. So this is in addition to the 82,000 episodes of clinical care. We're also a good, strong employer here. We employ over 375 full and part-time individuals, and about 190 of those reside right here in Dougherty County. About 10% of our staff members are recovery champions that are living in long-term recovery successfully from a behavioral health or substance use disorder. I'm sure you guys have heard at this point that there is an ask from the state to cut the budget by 11%. That's a tremendous cut. While we're not a state agency, our primary funder is the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. They have worked really hard to not impact direct care, but there's no way with a cut that large that we won't see some type of result here. What I'd like to say to you is now is not the time to reduce your mental health services. We know that the effects of a pandemic and a crisis are going to have a negative impact on overall health and wellness. Anytime we experience prolonged stressors like job and financial loss, childcare, educational barriers, fear about our health and wellness, uncertainty about the future, our essential workers and frontline workers have experienced trauma throughout this. You know, we know that depression and anxiety are going to increase. We also know that deaths of despair, which means deaths due to drug, alcohol, and suicide, are likely to increase. So right now, you know, what we'd like to see is us come together as a community to really promote, protect, and care for our mental health in this community, ensure that we continue to have the availability, you know, accessible and quality care available, and also build our mental health services, not reduce. And so, you know, we don't know the direct impact to Aspire at this point in time, but I'm just asking for that support and advocacy from the community. And, you know, if there are any local resources that are able to be moved towards our agency, we would be greatly appreciative. I do appreciate your time. That's a lot of information really quick, but I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all the commitment that you guys have given to this community to keep us safe. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those now.
Thank you, Mayor. Not really a question, and this is Mr. Pratt. I was going to say something, but I felt like Ms. Glass was coming after you, and I just want to take 45 seconds and tell y'all something I witnessed other day, and I think it will address both of them. I was in a particular area. The law was called to this house, and when they got up there, it could have really gotten out of hand, but it was, I believe it was probably one of the homes that Aspire has some of their residents in. To make a long story short, Mr. Pratt, the social worker was able to let the officers know this is one of our patients. There's problem with their meds, etc. So with those two agencies combined, with the law being there and one of the social workers, it took what could have been a horrible incident, and it really panned out and it worked well. And this leads me to listen to what Mr. Pratt says and what Ms. Glass has said. And one thing I do want to ask you, because I know mental illness is such a huge issue in this community. And is there, are y'all looking at anything down the line? Because we have areas where it seems like, you know, I'll give you an incident, Mabry Hotel. We know that's where a lot of the ex-sex offenders are at. Is there a way of identifying some of these homes or some of these areas to where when an officer gets called to a certain area, we automatically know? I mean, does this make sense to you? I'm seeing where other cities are saying, hey, let me mark their address, let me mark their mailbox, let me mark something, because it's a world of difference when officers realize, are they dealing with alcohol? Are they dealing with drugs? Are they dealing with mental illness? Or in this case, they were dealing with all three. And for the social worker and the officer to work hand in hand, Mr. Pratt, that's to me what made this situation so much better. So is there something that we can do as a city to maybe look into this? Thank both of you.
There's actually a new movement. They've been working on implementing this over in Blakely. It's essentially like a yellow card that would go with a home that has some type of identified either health factor or mental illness or those types of things. Whatever somebody agrees to allowing to be identified, we couldn't just do it without permission. But that would certainly be something we'd be happy to work with, you know, the city on ways that we could identify that so that we could be pulled in as part of the intervention process. And
could you come up with a, heaven knows you got enough, but could you come up with maybe a cost and how you think it would work? Because that is something, again, I think this might, I hope Mr. Pratt's still on the line, but this is something I think that him and a lot of other communities are looking at, and it is something that I'd surely think that maybe some of the commission could get behind. So again, thank all of you for your time. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Good morning, Ms. Glass. How you doing this morning?
Good morning.
Ms. Glass, since the General Assembly reconvened yesterday, have the Albany Service Community Board decided they were going to call our 4 elected officials and tell them that to make sure that these 11% cuts, how it will have a deep impact on this community?
Actually, yes, I'm part of a committee with the Georgia CSB Association that is actually wrote a white paper that will go to all of the legislators, and I'm reaching out directly to all the ones that represent our districts and our areas with that information that educates on the system as a whole, because we're one of 23, and if there is a significant cut statewide, I mean, you're looking at all Georgians, not just Southwest Georgia. But that white paper will be going out this week to all legislators. I can send it to you all too. It's got information about the system and then about what we're expecting to see after this pandemic. You know, just really educating about the risk of cutting the system at this point.
And a follow-up, Miss, can you hear me, Miss Glad?
I can.
Okay, and a follow-up, not because I was a former employee at Aspire, but as soon as possible, I think that you can get with the mayor and he can do some follow-ups that invite us to the Aspire to see exactly what's going on and how that this the program is needed, and it must be needed because as we begin to grow, there's a lot of stigma that still exists in this community and nationwide about mental illness. So if we can have like a tour of for about an hour or so, it will certainly enlighten and inform us that
we would love that. We would absolutely love that. I think a lot of times we probably don't do a good enough job of tooting our own horn, you know, so we're just out there doing the work. And then, but I'm really, really proud of the work that we do. We have, like I said, a complete continuum of care from that very, very high level of care to a low level. And I don't think people realize everything that can occur in between. So yes, we would love that.
Okay, thank you very kindly.
Any other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Glass?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Hubbard, Mr. Fletcher.
Was that
Mr. Young?
I think that was Mr. Pratt responding, because I think somebody addressed, I think Commissioner Fletcher addressed Mr. Pratt in her earlier comments.
I addressed both of them at the same time because I felt like one of the programs he was asking was leading into maybe what Ms. Glass was asking. So it was addressing both of them at the same time. Thank you.
I don't think Mr. Fletcher's asking a question of Professor Platt, were you?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Any other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Glass?
Yeah, Ms. Glass, I was going to ask you, did you all have any existing partnerships with the city? I know it's been, I guess, some time since we had, I assume, some type of state mental health institution right here in Albany, but how are you all tied into, I guess, the government in terms of maybe do you have any programs that are already partnering with the police? Do they even maybe sometimes call you all if they have some type of issue? How does that work?
So we do work very well with law enforcement. I have a tremendous respect and appreciation for our law enforcement. They have worked certainly with us. One of the things that we do is we provide a crisis intervention training for law enforcement once a quarter. It's not just here, it's usually held here locally, but law enforcement from the Southwest Georgia area are able to come where we provide education on mental illness and resources available for adults and children, addictive disease and developmental disabilities, so that when our officers do go out, they're able to better recognize what it is that they're encountering and able to de-escalate a situation. You know, that team of officers has worked very, very hard to, you know, have all of their officers trained. We've had to call on them. Sometimes situations are beyond what we're able to manage safely, and they respond to our call. You know, everything doesn't go perfectly on our end or their end, but the one thing I can say is that law enforcement has been committed to coming back and having the conversation with us continuously about how we can make it better and how we can best serve the individuals locally.
And to respond to Ms. Fletcher's about marking the houses, that is a part of what we can do. But the call that I mentioned is having more data on the police side, which is going to take a top-down approach from the city manager and from the police chief. So while marking houses may help, it's going to take an evaluation of the types of calls regarding mental health and all the other kind of social services that the police respond to. Thank you.
So Mr. Pratt, when you say that on the police, are you talking about, clear that up. Surely we don't want to put addresses out here on where our officers live. I mean, I don't even know what the reason for that would be, so is that what you're asking? I might be missing.
Oh, no, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am. Those are two different things. So with the officers, when you go to the city's website, you don't
Yes, sir.
know, we don't see what officers and the resources as clear as we can be. There's a page for
Okay.
the chief and all those kind of things. So that's one thing. The other part is the data to evaluate the types of calls so we can hire social workers and other
Oh,
social
okay.
agents.
Okay, cool. That makes sense, Mr. Pratt. Thank you, sir.
I can see
Any
where
other
that data would be beneficial, because the nature of our setup is to serve those that don't have the ability to access healthcare another way. And so if we had a little bit more of that data, I could see where we could connect maybe to services a little sooner. The sooner you intervene and the more often you intervene, the better your outcomes are. So, that could be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. I sent a memo out last Friday, and one of the speakers, the mayor of Tampa, I believe, used to be a police officer,
Mhm.
and she pointed out that the average citizen has no idea of the high percentage of encounters between police officers and the public involves people who have mental illness, who are intoxicated, or have some drug addiction, or are homeless, or when there's a domestic altercation, and just the amount of stress, the point she was making, that police officers deal with every day. And that was one recommendation, that to make sure that police departments do have qualified counselors, and that officers are encouraged to pursue that option. So, but the one thing, Ms. Glass, I would like to say to you, I'd ask you, you mentioned that a funding source for Aspire is the Department of Behavioral Health.
Yes, sir.
What percentage of your budget comes from the Department of Behavioral?
About 50% of our budget comes from the department. About 45% comes from Medicare and Medicaid billings and services, and the remaining 5% comes sometimes from grants, but about 3% of that comes from insurance, private pay.
Okay, so the Department of Behavioral Health, is that division of the Department of Public Health?
It's a state agency. It's not part of public health.
So it's a separate
standalone
department.
It's a separate department.
Okay.
They're responsible
Well,
for all of the
one-
community service boards statewide, in the state hospitals that are still open and operating.
As you may or may not be aware, Congress is considering proposed legislation, and one option is for the federal government to transfer funds to state and local governments to make up for losses occasioned by COVID. So in that event, the 11% across the board reduction, the state might have funds later in the year, but certainly if monies become available to the to local governments, I'm sure that we would consider us providing some assistance to Aspire, and I'm confident the city manager will monitor that as it goes through Congress.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the consideration. The 11% is actually very high. A lot of our the neighboring states are looking somewhere more around the nature of 4%, which is what we already had for this fiscal year from the state. So an additional is tough. It's tough. So thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Glass. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Next, we have the budget discussion. If I could go back, I think I'm going in line now, Ms. Kelly. Okay. Mr. Brown and the city manager will discuss the budget. Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Ms. Subadan. As you mentioned, this is a discussion, a continuation of our budget presentation. The original budget was presented on May 19th. We had a public hearing scheduled for June 2nd. Didn't have, I think we had one person to sign up, but then withdrew. Of course, we had our public hearing on the original proposed budget, which is currently posted on the city's website, a budget in brief, and then a detailed copy of the budget, which was $290.3 million. And during our previous discussions, I know the board has made several comments and recommendations. And so in addition to the original proposed budget, what you have in your packet today is also a revised budget, which is very similar to the original budget with a few changes. I think the 6% salary increase has already been mentioned today. There's no change there from the original proposed budget to the revised budget. The original budget had a 2.3% COLA for all employees. This revised budget has a 2.5% salary increase for all city personnel grades 1 through 10.
Excuse me, Mr. Brown, excuse me. I don't see this document is not in our handout, is it?
Yes, sir. It should be the second, and mine is showing pages 4 and 5. Page 4 is the original presented budget, and page 5 is a summary of the revised budget, but the sort of the details of the changes on the face of the agenda item.
Okay. On the top of page 4 in mine, I have major object of expenditure.
Yes, if you're now on page 3, it sort of summarizes the difference.
Okay. Okay, I got you. I'm sorry.
And so the changes, like I say, from a financial piece, the changes are minor. Again, the 2.5% COLA for grades, salary increase for grades 1 through 10 only. The revised budget also presents code enforcement as a separate department. And I think there was some discussion about the alley paving not being done in SPLOST 7, but being moved to T-SPLOST. That is addressed in this budget. The funding for the fire station number 2.
Well, I mean, excuse me, that's one thing that caused me some concern. Mr. Brent, you said there was some discussion about that. I don't ever think we took a vote on that, did we?
On which one?
You're saying that discussion about alley paving being transferred. I think I had proposed we could do that, but then there's something in the packet that says, oh, here it is on page 3. SPLOST 7 does not transfer alley paving to T-SPLOST.
Yes, in that original proposal, it really reduced, and we were trying to accommodate for the reduction in tax revenue. And so we were going to not do alley paving in SPLOST 7, but do it in T-SPLOST, which already has that category. So what we were in effect doing were reducing the alley paving allocation between both revenue sources by $1.8 million. And so we have not done that in this particular budget. So there's still dollars in SPLOST 7 in this proposal. There's still that $1.8 million in SPLOST 7 for alley paving, plus the full allocation that was already in T-SPLOST for alley paving.
Okay, what I'm saying is, who made that decision and when did they make it?
That was highlighted in one of the budget discussions that we had with the board.
Mayor, I can weigh in on that.
Okay.
What we did is took your feedback, and that's why you see an original and a proposed revised. The purpose of getting your feedback is to present you with different options. So this is providing you with different options. You're not, as you know, you're not voting on the budget today. You vote on the budget next week. What we are continuously looking for is guidance from you as a board. So we've incorporated your comments. We spread the SPLOST 7 over 2 for Fire Station 2 over 2 years as a way to balance the SPLOST because we were short. And then we also added 80,000 for traffic calming based on your comments. So what you have in front of you is the original that I presented, and a revised with your comments. So what we're seeking is, you know, what you want to do going forward. So I don't need you to share the screen. I'm not sure why they're doing that. So you could take that off. Thank you. So what we're seeking is guidance. It would be helpful to us to nail it down before next week, when we're right up against the deadline for you to approve the budget in your regular meeting. But what we're attempting to do is incorporate your comments. Some of those I think came from you, some came from Commissioner Warbington, and others I believe had weighed in. So that's what's in front of you today. And, you know, we seek your guidance.
Okay, Mr. Brown, I'm sorry, you can proceed.
Well, the city manager sort of covered the last points, and then the final one was the $80,000 budget in T-Splosh for the traffic calming devices. And so when you take the two proposals and compare them, there's an actual reduction of $464,000, right at $465,000 over the original proposed budget. And so the things we just sort of reviewed sort of explain why the budget went down. But again, just from an overall standpoint, sort of minor reduction in totality when you are looking at the dollar amount.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Subadan, did you want to speak separately?
No, sir, I've contributed what I have.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions?
Ms. Subadan.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. How you do?
I'm well.
Right. And you did say in this that there was another revision that for the code enforcement to stand alone, right?
We did put it in there. We did make the adjustment to make it a separate department. It wasn't a monetary adjustment. It was really more of a structural change.
Okay. And since we're in the process of the budget, is the chief on the line?
I'm pretty sure he can jump on real quick.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask the chief a question?
Yes, sir.
Mayor, Commissioner, Ms. Subadan.
Morning. We need Commissioner Howard to unmute, please.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Fuller, any questions?
Yes, sir. So what is the total allocation then into our keeping T-Splosh and Splosh 7 for alley paving? What would the number be for alley paving?
The original amount in Splosh 7 for alley paving is $2 million, so it will continue to be $2 million. The original allocation for alley paving in T-Splosh is $4.7 million. It will continue to be $4.7 million.
So a total of $6.7 million.
That's $6.7 million for this fiscal year?
No, not at all. That would be the total allocation for alley paving, including both funding sources.
Okay, over a period of years, but what are we anticipating in this budget for alley paving for the fiscal year?
I believe we budgeted 1.8 million this year. We actually have alley paving bids on the street. Actually, I think the bids are back. So very shortly, we'll be bringing that forward to you.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No, sir.
Commissioner Warbington?
Yeah, so for these 6 items that Derek talked about, I would support all 6 of these in terms of changes to the budget and as a proposal. Two other things, and I know we're kind of here at the 9th hour. I still would like to have the fiber relocation from the Gordon Hotel pulled from the budget. And the reason I say that is not from a technical, I'm not a technical guru at all. I just believe that investing that amount of money into a business requires a higher level discussion that we need to have as a board. If we're going to invest I think it's 1.2, 1.3, I believe this commission ought to talk about, is that the place we want to invest? Does it help it become more profitable? I know it removes a risk, and that's really the primary thing I've heard about that project. But I would like to submit that we pull that from the budget. I believe there's a little bit of operating dollars in that amount and a good bit of SPLOST dollars that's in that amount. The second proposal, and this is kind of in light of where we're at as a country and even as some of the speakers that have just spoken to us, certainly we're not going to figure out in a week or two how to adapt and to make some changes and to take feedback that we've heard. But I would like to allocate some amount of money to starting work around these ideas that were just given to us, whether it's $100,000, whether it's $200,000, to form a group or engage a consultant. I don't know if we need to hire somebody full time, but definitely instead of removing funding, I believe that we have funds available in our budget to add additional funding to help identify some opportunities going forward. And then maybe that group will identify larger things, and it would take the form of a budget amendment if we want to, add staff or social services or certain things that were brought up. But I was just going to suggest that we do earmark some money to indicate that we want to put money towards it and to get the process started, either to engage a consultant, hire somebody or something to get some work going in that area. So that would be my 2 input items, in addition to the 6 that Derek's already talked to us about.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown, can you offer some clarity on the traffic calming devices? I know we had one citizen email us a couple of days ago saying that we didn't have any money committed to traffic calming devices, and that kind of shocked me. But is that being handled through the SPLOST, or tell me how that's working? Because they made the comment, so I was like, wait a minute, because I know I had people who were I had several requests for speed bumps and things like that. Is that not included in this budget, or no? Was that incorrect?
Well, it was not originally. That would be an accurate statement. And the budget that was initially proposed, it did not have, even though we have $500,000 in T-SPLOST for traffic calming devices, we did not have any allocated originally in the budget we presented on May 19th. But as a result of the board's feedback, we did put $80,000 in there going in next year's budget under T-SPLOST allocations.
Okay, thank you. And if the chief is available, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to this. This is a budget hearing, and there's been some discussion around, this narrative of defunding the police. Chief, did you want to speak to some of that?
Good morning again. The only thing I have to say is that when law enforcement is called upon to handle a lot of situations, and that's going to depend on from community to community. I do say that when you look at addressing the needs of the community. I believe we all know what the socioeconomic concerns we have, and it just is going to depend on this commission's decision on which direction you want it to go. I serve at the behest of the people of Albany, Georgia, and I'm here to make sure that we meet all of the needs. With that being said, it is in my heart that as I lead this organization, that I'm always concerned about how we can do things better to not just to be the best department around, but be the department that this community needs. With change, it's going to be some conflict, but out of that change, growth is always there. So I am open to any discussion that would be had with anyone, because this is the community's police department. But like I said, it's dependent on the direction that this commission wants the city to go in.
Thank you, Chief. And I'll just say that, those of us who are in the community who are taking a hard look at all of these things and doing the work out in the streets, really much appreciate you and your community-minded mindset. And I think that does lead to where I think we can say in Albany, Georgia, that it's not our situation in terms of what we see nationwide, and we appreciate you for that. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Chief, are you still on the line?
Yes, sir.
Chief, back on your budget where it said that on the Albany police drug ADU, we still have the 12 officers? Are we short in the officer?
Yes, sir. I still have vacancies at the drug unit.
Okay. Do you know by how many are you?
Right now, my vacancies are 6 officers. I'm 6 short at the drug unit.
6 short at drug unit?
Yes, sir.
How many vacancies you have at the gang task force meeting?
For my gang unit, I just had an officer who accepted a job elsewhere, so that'll put me down another 6. I'm sorry, 7.
So what you're saying at the gang task force, it's been budgeted for 14 officers. You say you're short 6 officers?
No, I'm short 7.
So that means that we just only got 7 working, right?
Yes, sir. 7 field. Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many you said with the ADU?
6.
6. Okay. So do you think by this 6% raise that we're going to give public safety officers, do you think that that would be an incentive to try to expedite and get their position filled?
It can help, sir, to be honest with you. But once again, I still stand on, we need to make sure that we bring the right people in. It can help put us above other agencies, and officers can see that Albany is attractive. But it's just one of many factors that will help us recruit good people and retain the ones we have.
And Chief, let me ask you another question. In the House of Representatives, which got a sneak preview of some things that they're going to put forward, like in police reform, as of today, do we continue to, this may not be a budget item, Mr. Mayor, but I just need to ask that I'm concerned about the ban on no-knock warrant. And also about the chokeholds that have been used in the past and things of that nature. So do you think if this Police Reform Act is passed, could we implement some of those things in our police department? Are they already there?
Well, They're already there. In our policy, we don't teach, and we don't teach net restraints. We don't allow net restraints. As far as the no-knock warrant, I do, that is a judiciary consideration, because we have to get the judge's permission, or the judge's sign off on the authorization. You know, the longer discussion is, if you have a credible information, it's the right information, then based on the circumstances, a no-knock can be authorized. We do monitor that. It has always been monitored, even from my days as a narcotics agent. So those are things we will continue on. I do have a document that I'll be sharing with the city manager that she'll pass out to you. It's in response to the 8 Can't Wait campaign, that those 8 criteria that they're already covered in our policy and have been covered in our policy because of our accreditation as a CALEA agency and also for our state certification.
Okay, and a follow-up that we probably need to take it a step further is that there's still in communities, and especially community of color, that there's what you call racial profiling because of peoples of color. And also there's other things in the community that we talk about religion profiling in the community, because someone of a different faith may decide that the police officer may not be well abreast with that. So I think that those are some things that we certainly need to look at when this bill, when the House of Representatives come back on June 25th, 2020, to see can we just implement some of those things and follow that as a guideline, because we certainly have in the past have had some of these cases that probably were could be labeled as police brutality in the community. So we certainly want to make sure that our officers that that are out there, that they're aware of some of these SOPs, standard operation procedure. But Chief, as of today also, you don't have to answer the question, but how many officers are we short as of today before we vote on this budget next week?
Well, to go back to your first statement, sir, we do annual training on cultural awareness and our bias-based policing, which includes racial profiling, which we cannot do. So everyone, whether they're brand new or seasoned as I am, we go through this training. To answer your second question, sir, as of today, I have 30 entry-level vacancies at the patrol officer level.
30.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how many do you have in the academy now?
I have 9 in the academy now.
Okay. Do you know that those 9, do you think once they completed that we will be able to hire those 9, or somebody falls through the crack?
They already hired, sir.
Okay.
I hired them a month ago.
Okay. So they're still in the training, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome, sir.
I mentioned in one of those memos I sent out the last week, it might be beneficial to the commission for within 60, 90 days for the chief to give a presentation. When I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, I just had some general questions, and I was very impressed with the procedures and policies that have been in place for quite some time. As I said in the memo, Chief Persley said, in recent history, these control maneuvers, the chokehold, and what he's explained to me as hobbling, is the position Mr. Floyd was in, have been proscribed by the Albany Police Department for quite some time. I was glad to hear Ms. Glass, he mentioned to me that officers have some training, and Ms. Glass told us that Aspire actually helps, I think what she calls it, crisis intervention. Also, Chief Persley explained to me that officers have ongoing training in de-escalation. That's a term we've come in it's been mentioned in recent weeks, and basically de-escalation is the officer attempting to calm a subject or subjects, and basically physical force is the last resort. And also, I mean, Chief personally told me that sometimes if you have questions about an applicant, that you make the hard decision not to hire them if you think that even though they might be qualified in other respects, temperamentally they might be problematic. I guess we see why, but my, like I say, my sympathies and support are with law enforcement throughout this. We officers make mistakes, and we have to hire the right people. We have to have the proper procedures in place, and I think here in Albany that is the case. But as I said, I would suggest that 60, 90 days, the chief, if that's the will of the commission, make a presentation and update us on these matters. But thank you, Chief.
Mayor, I have one more.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Young. Look, we'll go around the table one time.
I have one more question on the budget item.
Commissioner Young, can we go around the table? Mayor Pro Tem, do you have anything else?
Now, you did say within 60 to 90 days he would come out with a revision or.
That was just my suggestion, Mayor Pro Tem, because I mean, I really learned a lot in speaking with you personally.
I think that would be a good idea, because at that time, whether this bill come through from our elected officials on the federal level, that he can incorporate some of those things into policy and procedures.
I think we're going to find many of those recommendations already in our policy and procedure.
Okay.
But Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, I think I'd like to Chief Percy to come back in 60 days and to give us an update on, as you know, we've learned, and as you mentioned, as the chief explained, that we already have some of those procedures in place, or have outlawed some of those, and would like to see where we stand in 60 days.
Thank you, Commissioner Fuller. Commissioner Fletcher?
Yes, sir. I think that is a great plan of action. And what I'd like to know is there a possibility that we could look at getting this out to the public? Mr. Pratt talks about not enough knowledge on the website. So is it something that we can let the public, or really anyone, know our policies, how we work? Because I think it would help with some things that come up in question on our policies. Could we get them out on our website and to the public? Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Worthington?
Nothing, I guess, just for clarification, are we going to do a straw vote on the 6 recommendations, just so we can get staff a semblance of where we stand on these 6 items? Is that what you were going to?
Okay.
I didn't know what the procedure was, what we were going to do.
I had not, but I think that'd be the best approach, yeah, but I had not considered it. Is that all? Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing to add.
All right, Commissioner Young, we come back to you. I'm sorry.
No problem. I just want to get 2 points of clarification. Was the city manager going to get back with us on options regarding the request for the pay increase for the firefighters? And then also, I know we discussed a general increase across the city. Is that off of the table? And if it is still on the table, does that include firefighters?
Would you like me to take that now?
Yes.
The bullet number 2 on your cover demonstrates that the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, for 2.5% is for all personnel in grades 1 through 10. And that includes fire personnel in grades 1 through 10.
So they will be getting some type of increase.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clear. Thank you.
Sure.
Is that all, Commissioner Young?
That's it, sir.
Okay, I concur with Commissioner Warmington about the fiber hut expenditure. I think we should postpone it for the simple reason, sitting on the utility board, I sent a memo out a couple of weeks ago, and I think the commission needs to make the decision whether or not the city needs to be in the fiber optic business. If we do, I think, well, we need to consider what investment would be required to make it profitable, if it could be profitable. I set forth the my concerns in that memo, and I think it might be unwise to spend over $1 million to relocate the I guess brain of the whole system if we're not going to stay in the, or if it's not going to be a profitable venture. But that's my feelings. So with that,
Mayor, can I
yes, ma'am.
respond? Actually, the responses to the earlier concern about bringing together the concerns raised by our community around policing, you will recall that we're in the process of getting a study done and an evaluation done of the Albany Police Department. And we have allocated $75,000 in our budget for that purpose. If you so desire, we could broaden the scope of that study to include some of the new information. I think it would have already dealt with some of the things that have been raised. I know Jane Castor personally. She was the police chief when I was in Tampa. And, you know, what she said, Chief Pursley has confirmed since I've been here, we have the data. You know, the other thing, not only do our police have to be the social support and psychological and, you know, counselors when they go out on calls because of mental health issues, the other thing you will find is the greatest number of people that are in a confined area that have mental health disorders is our county jail. So this is not a small issue for any community, and of course we are no different. But I did want to remind you that that process is ongoing. That is funded at $75,000 this year, and if you so desire, we could broaden the scope. In terms of the data center, I would encourage you to leave it in the budget for future discussion. None of that funding could be spent without your approval. There are several things that we would like to pull together to discuss further with you. You know, not the least of which is, you recall, we have an EDA project for the underground of utilities. It also includes putting in additional fiber. So we really have some opportunities that I think we would like the opportunity to further discuss in greater detail as to what our future could look like. The biggest issue, though, is even if we never serve one external customer, the fiber connection that's currently at 207 Pine is a single point of interest, and it is the support for every single city and county function. That is everything from 911 to Albany Utilities SCADA system that monitors all of our functions. It keeps us, you know, it allows us to be able to process city functions like taking payments and processing and all of the functions that we do every day. And the courts, everything is in that brain. And so even if we didn't have outside customers, the internal customers are significant. and provide a significant backbone to the operation of not only the city, but the utility and the county. So even if we never served a single customer, I think this is something that ought to have been done. And I implore you to keep it in the budget. Ultimately, though, you are the policymakers, and we will follow your lead.
Mayor, if I can just jump right behind her, you know, as a IT guy, what you're basically dealing with these fiber cables, you're basically dealing with the same situation that we've had with our sewer system. You need those cables, you need backups, you need the things that are going to help that existing infrastructure, because it's not going to go away. And as the city manager said, we rely on them just like we rely on, you know, our sewer system. So if you don't, you know, go ahead and take care of that, we're looking at the same situation, you know, that we're having with our sewer system now, where maintenance wasn't done in years past, and you know, all of a sudden we have, you know, a crisis situation. That's not what you want. It's the same concept. Redundancy for a counted upon resource like our city and county data system is just something that's just not smart, not only smart to do, that's just what you have to do, because you know, things break down, things fall apart. So that I just want you to see that in that totality. It's not just some type of investment we're hoping that something else is going to happen. That's something that's an infrastructure issue, just like sewer maintenance and anything else.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. This is kind of not on the developer of the Gordon Hotel. Are they still intending to proceed?
Yes, sir. I actually spoke with them last week. I asked them for an update. And what we'd like to do is bring them to you in July to give you an update. They'll have some renderings for you to bring their plans to life. They're going to be ready to submit plans to the Planning and Development Department for their first review. The data center continues to move along, and so that project is moving forward. It did take a bit of a delay with equipment receipt and several other things, but that project is expected to continue to move forward. And you'll be hearing more about that in the month of July.
And with Commissioner Warmington's recommendation that we take a straw vote on the recommendations, which are at page 3 of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at that? Mayor Pro Tem stepped out a second. Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir. I guess I would, on those items, the one thing that I would like to hear a little more detail about the code enforcement, exactly how that would be done if that was being moved out from under the police department. So that would be my item of those 6. Would like to hear a little more about that before I was good there, but everything else looks okay.
So you want to hear that now, or there's a conditional?
We could hear. I could hear that offline. I can get some more information from.
Okay, we have one abstention. Commissioner Fletcher. Yes. Okay. Commissioner Warmington.
Yes, I'm good with those 6.
Commissioner Langstaff. Is that just a no generally, or you want to express some specific concern?
Nothing to express now, just a no.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Young.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, we were taking a straw poll about whether to proceed with the budget based on the items identified on page 3. Is that agreeable, or you have some reservation or objection? Okay. Mayor votes yes. That's 5 in support, 1 abstention, 1 no. Okay. The next item on I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, City Manager, does that conclude the budget discussion?
Yes, sir. And those, page 5 is the summary of what's outlined on page 3. So based on the information we have now, when this is presented for the final vote, it will be the summary on page 5, which is the revised budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I need to ask, Mr. Brown,
Yes, sir.
how you doing again this morning?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Okay. When we discussed the issue about employment last week, did you ever find out what would that JRN Incorporation stand for?
Yes, I haven't gotten a final number back from the chamber yet, but that JRN is the KFC franchises that we have here. So I did get confirmation on that, but I don't have a confirmation on that local number. The chamber provides that information to us, but we have been in contact with them, and so they are following up on that for us.
And Mr. Mayor, the reason why I asked him when I was going through the snapshot budget where it said major employer, and I was confused when that at the bottom where it said JRN Incorporation, and we thought it was telecom, but Mr. Brown did allude that he was going to do some research and see what that's KFC.
My son looked it up. That's what he came
up with.
Okay. But it wouldn't have 624 employees in the city, would it?
Well, I don't think so. But I mean, I pointed out in a letter that we keep putting Phoebe Putney has 3,500 employees, but that's people who are employed at Phoebe Sumter and the hospital in Cuthbert, Phoebe Worth, and the clinics outside Doherty County. So that's somewhat misleading, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it could. What I'm saying is, it could be a corporation that has headquarters in Albany, and most of those employees are elsewhere, which is somewhat inaccurate, I think. But we can look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, we're looking into all of them and we will update that.
Okay. And with that, does that conclude the budget discussion? All minds are clear, satisfied. The next item on the agenda is Chehaw Authority, the fiscal year 2021 management agreement. Mr. Brooks, I think, is going to be presenting this item. Brooks, you on the line?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Brooks, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, Commissioners, Madam Manager. Today on the agenda is an item for the Chehaw Authority, looking for the Commission to consider entering another one-year management agreement. This Chehaw one-year management agreement with the City of Albany would end on June 30th of 2021. It is reflected in the budget with an $882,000 allocation to support this one-year management agreement. As a part of the agreement, Chehaw must continue to provide maintenance for a park for public benefit for exhibiting animals, conducting educational programs, offer camping facilities, offer facility event leases, and other recreational activities. And Chehaw must still meet all the standard practices of operating a park, insurance requirements. They must have an audit conducted. Records must be accessible to the public. Also, we're continuing forward in the agreement the different benchmark measures that Chehaw's board has been hard at work trying to pull together to measure net revenues, to establish reserves at Chehaw to increase attendance and to also leverage city funding, the $882,000. And then also a requirement which Chehaw provides during their meetings is basically reports to the city manager on the status of these measures. And Chehaw has been putting together a dashboard monthly that provides that information to the board. And of course, your city manager is an ex officio member of that board. This also requires Chehaw to continue towards the development of a strategic and development master plan. So again, the request is to enter a one-year management agreement with Chehaw to continue allowing them to strategize and kind of provide a direction on where this park would be going in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Brooks? Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Brooks, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Commissioner. Thank you.
Right. As we speak, are all of the vacancy on the Chehaw Park field as of today?
I'm not sure if there is a vacancy on the board right now. I can get back to you with an answer on that, but I do know that the city clerk, based on statute, would advertise for those positions to be filled. It's a 9-member board.
Okay. Okay. That's it. And just be safe in Tallahassee. Y'all got issues there now.
We all do right now, don't we?
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Commissioner Fuller?
No, sir. No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Warmington?
No, nothing.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Yeah, I do have a comment. The proposed one-year agreement requires Chehaw to maintain AZA accreditation. And right now they don't have AZA accreditation. They lost it, I think, back in 2018. So I would think that would not need to be part of the management agreement. And it has been my contention that that needs to be vetted thoroughly to decide whether they really need to be chasing AZA accreditation, considering the expense involved and, you know, the fact the River Aquarium is not AZA accredited. Anyway, that's my position on it. At least that would leave it open. So if part of the strategic plan or the planning that they're doing decides that they don't need to chase AZA accreditation, they would be open to do that. Right now, the way the agreement's written is it mandates that. So I would be opposed to it just because it mandates AZA accreditation.
Where does it say that, Commissioner Langstaff? I thought it said you had to maintain the animal collection in accordance with AZA. You there, Commissioner Langstaff?
Yeah, I had to flip over to see where it was. It's section 2.1.
Yeah, I think you, it doesn't say, I think you're wrong about that. I think that was corrected. If you look at it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
What? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Brooks, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Again, the park realizes they're not accredited anymore, unfortunately, but they do want to continue to follow the standards that AZA requires, just in case the master plan or the strategic plan does call for that, then they are already positioned in that direction. No harm, no foul sort of perspective.
Commissioner Langstaff, are you satisfied with that?
No, because I mean, the way the agreement's written, it requires them to do that. And I guess what's going to happen is that down the road, somebody's going to pull up this little agreement and say, it's a responsibility of Chehaw to strive for that. And in years past, that has meant adding 6 inches to a fence that USDA did not require to be as high as AZA did. So if you're going to care for animals to AZA standards, it may make you spend money that's silly to spend.
Okay.
But
what I, okay. I'm
I
sorry.
just don't, I think it ought to be optional, that's all. I mean, I'm fine if they want to aspire to do that, but the way the contract's written, it's a responsibility. They
Well,
have
I
to
don't,
do it.
I think the contract's expired though. That's the whole point of it. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That's the whole point of this 1-year management agreement.
That's what it says in the 1-year management agreement.
Where does it say, where does it say that? I'm sorry. I'm missing it.
2.1.
No, but it doesn't say you have to maintain accreditation. It says you have it requires the park to maintain to comply with the policies and guidelines. It doesn't say anything about accreditation, I don't think.
No, well, I guess the thing is you could be non-accredited, but still spend all the money to try to maintain the animals in the way that AZA regulations say. So in other words, you got to have a fence that's 6 inches higher than USDA says you have to have.
Okay. Well, I think
we ran into that years ago. I mean,
I think Mr. Brooks explained that I mean, the authority wants to pursue accreditation, and I have encouraged, I think at some point in the fall, the authority will come forward and provide you with information as to the benefits of accreditation, and that's certainly, and we can address it at that time. But anything else, Commissioner Langstaff?
That's all I got.
Okay, Commissioner Young?
I didn't have anything.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I think it was a mistake in years past to reduce the transfer. The park has made progress in generating revenue. The discussion from years past about the park being self-sufficient was basically irresponsible, misguided. It's not going to happen. There's discussions. If you have a municipal zoo, I think 30 to 40% is going to of the budget's going to have to be a subsidy. But with that, I also want to point out what's been brought to my attention, that in recent years, the tornadoes, Hurricane Michael, and COVID, just like, I mean, probably had a bigger impact on attendance at the park, with the exception of COVID, than how those prior disasters affected local businesses. So those are challenges that the park has faced, and with that, does anybody have any other questions of Mr. Brooks?
I have a question, Mayor. You mentioned COVID, affecting the park. I wonder, has there been any funds that the Chi Hall has been able to receive related to COVID?
Yes, Commissioner Fuller. I can. Mr. Gregors come in a. Can we get Mr. Gregors on the screen, or? Okay, Mr. Gregors, you want to come take my chair? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Gregors. I was just asking if the if Chi Hall, if there are any funds allocated federally for due to COVID-19 for Chi Hall.
Yes, we did qualify for a FEMA project for the emergency response to COVID, and that all of our efforts will be paid at 75% by FEMA for all of our PPE, signage, and that response. We did qualify at Chi Hall for the SBA PPP loan, and anticipate that would get forgiven as well.
Okay, how much was that PPP amount?
It was 193,000, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. No other questions.
Anybody else have any questions of Mr. Gregors? Okay. With that, do we need to take a straw vote on the management agreement? Mayor Pro Tem? Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir.
I can't hear them. I didn't hear,
Commissioner Fletcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Warrington?
Yes.
Commissioner Langstaff? Commissioner Young?
yes.
Mayor votes yes. So, and this is, as I understand, Mr. Brown, included in the budget, correct? Mr. Brown there?
Yes, yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Next, my agenda, Public Works matters. The first item, Madam Clerk.
Number one is Arbor Day easement accepted.
Okay. Is Mr. Maples on the line?
Yes, I am, sir. Good morning.
Okay, and this is, I believe it's on page 13 of the agenda packet. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Maples, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. This is an easement. We already have an existing easement. It's across two parcels. It's the old National Guard Armory parcel on North Monroe, and also a part of the Satterfield Ballpark where we built the connector trail. This is just a modification of that easement to allow for some plantings and the irrigation system that was installed as part of the Arbor Day. The initial easement that we got from the county specifically stated only for the construction of the connector trail. So we're just asking for a modification to the existing easement to include the plantings and the irrigation. The county has already accepted these easements. It's presented for your approval to accept these easements.
Okay. Anybody having questions of Mr. Maples? Mayor Pro Tem? Commissioner Fuller?
No, sir, no questions.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
No, sir.
Okay. Take that for information. Does anybody have any concerns about accepting these easements? Okay, the next item, it looks like two sanitary sewer easements. Mr. Maples, you have the floor. It's on page 27 of your agenda packet.
Okay, thank you, sir. Again, this is two easements. The development that's taking place out there on Westover and Guillenville is called Woodlands Apartments. They're under construction. They're almost ready to complete the work. But as part of the review of the documents, we wanted to make sure that we secured two easements across their properties. The sanitary sewer was built originally as part of Glenarm Manors that was back in the 80s. But these sewers actually serve Glenarm. They also serve Draffin and Tucker, Home Run Foods, and several other businesses out there on Guillenville Road. So in order to make sure that we have a public sewer system and that we have the right to get in there and maintain part of that sewer system, we've asked Woodlands to deed us two sewer easements, and that's what's presented for your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Maples. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions? Commissioner Fuller?
No, sir.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
Nothing.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Maples. And the next item on the agenda is, I'm sorry, Ms. Kelly, you want to read that?
Street alley improvements, 3500 block of Wexford Drive speed table.
Okay. And Mr. Maples, do you have this item as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Again, we've been approached about doing a speed study on the 3500 block of Wexford Drive. We performed that speed study. It met the criteria as established in the traffic calming policy. We have put this out for bids. It requires according to the design, it requires for 4 speed tables. We put it out for bids with Central Services. Those bids have come back, and we're asking for your approval of the $16,800 for the speed tables. And as you see, we put in there, based on the time that we submitted the agenda item, the only funding source we had at the time was going to be for T-Splosh. So we're asking you to establish, number one, whether you want to move on with the speed tables, and another is to establish how it would be funded.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem? Commissioner Fuller?
Well, so I guess asking how it would be funded, is there, I know there was the original $500,000 allocated for speed tables. Is that all been exhausted at this point?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
You want me to go ahead and answer that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, none of that funding has been used. And so this would be, there's a resolution that you would vote on next week to authorize $16,800 from T-Splost for the traffic calming devices.
Okay, I guess the 500,000 I was referring to was from a previous SPLOST, I guess.
No, we didn't. This is the T-Splost is the first time that we've funded traffic calming out of SPLOST. It used to be funded out of our operating budget.
Okay, so this would be the first coming from T-Splost.
That's my recollection.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Warbington?
Nope, nothing.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, I just wanted to get a clarification on the process of getting traffic calming devices in neighborhoods. Is that a request that's made by the commissioner, or is it made by the citizens? How are we doing that? Because that's, I guess, for me, unclear.
It's generally made by the citizens, but as a commissioner, you can make a request as well, or the mayor can make a request. I think it was day before yesterday, or maybe Friday, I emailed you all the traffic calming policy that was adopted by the board. And it walks you through step by step. And Ken Breedlove, Ken Stock, and Ken and Bruce Maples are also able to walk you through specifics if you need help with that.
Okay, is it something that's so complicated that we can't kind of reduce that down to a general understanding that we can relate to citizens? Again, my main thing is to make government accessible to citizens, but it seems that we have a lot of processes that kind of get caught in the quagmire, and nobody, like, well, call your commissioner, or somebody complains and put stuff in the paper or something like that. So I'm just looking for a process that's somebody says, I think it's time for us to get a speed tables in our neighborhood. And how do we do that?
What I could do, if you like, is make a presentation at our next work session on it, but we'll also simplify it to kind of bullets and put that on our homepage and push something out on Facebook with a link. Again, it's a board adopted policy that we follow. It does require a majority of the affected neighbors to vote in the affirmative. It does require a speed study. It does require that, certain major roads are not eligible for speed bumps. And so, it's not overly complicated, but I do agree that it's not well understood. So we can make it clearer by synthesizing that. And I can also do have traffic do a presentation at an upcoming work session, so that it gets out there, not just in front of you, but in front of the public.
Yeah, that sounds real good. I also, like the idea of maybe public information, maybe even doing like a nice little video or something like that.
That was what I was thinking.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
That's all.
Mayor, Matt.
Okay.
Mayor, may I speak to what Demetrius was saying, Commissioner Young was saying?
Yes, Commissioner Warbington.
I guess one question I had, maybe this is for Nathan, or maybe if somebody from engineering, is one of the part of the process where drastically slows down to a snail's pace is trying to get signatures. Engineering has done a great job getting the studies done. They've got data really all over the whole city in terms of where the speed's happening. But when you got to get 85% of the signatures, like right now, I'm working on a couple of blocks and some citizens are working on along with me. And what happens is you get down to that one or two out-of-town owner, rental property, and I've had letters returned, you can't find them, and you're like, I just need 2 signatures to make this happen. So I guess my question is, where did the 85% come from? Is that a law or a rule, or why do you need signatures to put speed tables, or was that just an ordinance we came up with? I guess I was, maybe Nathan or engineering, kind of to Commissioner Young's question is why 85%?
That's just the number that was, proposed. It's not a Georgia code section requiring it.
This is Bruce Maples. When we were developing the traffic calming policy, we were asked to look at other communities that had similar policies. We did a major research on most of the ones in the state of Georgia that had adopted policies. We went to a seminar that was put on by one of the major traffic engineering groups that develop and look at speed studies and traffic calming policies. And based on that review of all those documents, that is where that number came from, is that was a generally accepted number as to what you had to have as far as number of people within the study area to actually approve. So it is something that was taken from other communities, especially up around the Atlanta area, that had adopted similar traffic calming policies.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bruce. I was just wondering. That's good to know.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you. I was unaware of the policies until the city manager emailed that to me. Now, obviously, the presentation would be beneficial to the citizens, but I was, as I said, frankly, unaware with the policies. I'm glad there are some objective criteria. The next item, we move to public function matters. Ms. Kelly?
Number 1, city initiated zoning request.
Okay. Is Commissioner Warmington are you going to present this item?
I can give a high-level description, but certainly, hopefully, Mr. Forgy or Ms. Teeter, they're the professionals. They can speak a lot more detail. But as far as, it just seemed the last 6 months, some of the controversial zonings that have happened has been in Ward 4. And what one area that's under consideration here with this agenda item is an area that was zoned back in 1970, has never changed zoning. Certainly back in 1970, they didn't have all the transitional housing, drug rehab, elderly daycare, all the things that can happen in today's zoning environment. And so here you have an area that's purely residential, few rental properties, couple duplexes, but it's pretty much single family homes. However, it's zoned CR. And what happens is this little area is a target, lack of a better word, for some of these zonings that really, I believe, are detrimental to residents to have them in their area. And so really from a landmark standpoint, this is the very east part of Mary Acres. So it's kind of where St. Teresa's Church and School is, from St. Teresa's east all the way to the old movie theater. And so it's kind of like a little triangle area between Gillionville and Dawson. And again, this area has been CR since the 70s. So for 50 years, it's been this zoning. However, in 2020, it really puts this community, this neighborhood, at risk of a lot of various zoning opportunities. And so what my recommendation, and I've been working with Mr. Forgy and Ms. Teeter, is can we back this back to a residential zoning? Not that folks can't still apply for whatever they want to apply for. It makes it a little harder, another step that they got to go through. It would require a zoning change versus just a special approval. So what the research that planning has done, if you can see the hatch mark on the next page, is, there's a few that'll be grandfathered in, but by and large, all the single family houses that are conforming, we're proposing to go to R2. And so this is the city will be the applicant. And that's why really it's coming before the commission, is the commission will need to approve to start the application. And then once it starts the application, then it will still go through all the hurdles, planning commission, public hearing, notification of citizens, and all that kind of stuff. But today is really just to get a majority vote that we want to move forward with stepping this area that is truly residential to have a residential zoning element. So that's my unprofessional, untrained explanation. And I don't know if Mr. Forgy or Ms. Teeter want to provide any additional details.
Mr. Forgy, you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. Would you like to speak to this?
Good morning. I'd be happy to. Commissioner Worthington did an excellent job, though, in explaining it. The commission has the authority to rezone property, of course, because the power to rezone or the power to zone lies with the commission. The original zoning was created by the commission, so it's perfectly legal to do it this way. It's just not all that common. This is an example of down zoning, where you take an area and put it into a zoning category that allows fewer uses. And as the commissioner explained, this is a residential area in character. And I think we'd like to see all the neighborhoods in Albany revitalized. So the more restrictive it is, the more restrictive the zoning is there, the more likely it will retain its single family character rather than allowing other uses in there, which a CR district does currently allow. So city initiated planning agrees in concept. It does have to go through all the same steps. So we'll go through a public hearing. All the property owners whose property will be changed will be notified, and they'll have the opportunity to comment. Both the planning commission and the city commission, and then the city commission will make the ultimate decision.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy.
You're welcome.
Any commissioners have any question? Mayor Pro Tem? Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir. Are there currently any in that area that's been designated? Are there currently any businesses operating under commercial status?
There are no businesses that would be rezoned. There are some on the fringe of this area, but none that in that area that would be rezoned.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Worthington?
I have no question for myself.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Young?
Just a quick question. Is I thought planning was pretty much a function of the county. So we have input on the I guess the master zoning plan, the city commission?
Yes, sir. The planning functions are shared by the city and county. It's a joint planning commission, city and county. And so if there's any rezonings in the unincorporated county, they go to the county board. But if they're within the incorporated city, they go to the city board. So, then the planning commission is combined, and the combined members would review any proposals, either by citizens or by the government.
Okay, and one other question, in the zonings that, I guess kind of allow, alcohol establishments, where can we look in the policy for those? Is it a particular zoning designation? Do we need to set up another zoning designation? I guess that's the question that we have, but we kind of seeing the function of it when something's zoned, you know, C, like over here where we had the situation, the liquor store in South Albany, a C3. What exactly are those areas that we may need to look at in terms of making sure alcohol establishments, you know, don't go where they're supposed to, don't go where they don't need to go, and business owners don't, you know, kind of get caught up in you know, our discussions about, you know, this is an establishment that doesn't need to be near residential homes, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. I think that's a big discussion. I don't know. Zoning looks at just the general use. So generally, an alcohol establishment is a commercial use. So it's allowed, I believe, in all commercial zones. But that's just that's the first step. It's a two-step process at least. The owner still has to get an alcohol license. So I'm not sure. I think it's a good discussion that we get into, but I'm not sure if it's zoning that needs to be changed or the alcohol license process that needs to be changed. But certainly we could look at limiting the commercial zones that it's allowed in. But right now it's allowed in commercial, just like any other commercial activity.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy. I'll just leave it at this, Mr. Mayor, and this is part of the larger discussion in terms of, you know, alcohol establishments in the wrong locations and in locations that cause problems and are problematic, and it all deals with the whole thing with blight and the way our community looks. And as I told you earlier, I think we do need to take a look at the zoning and the regulations surrounding alcohol licensing, and I'm glad Commissioner Warbington is pushing this forward. So I definitely want to have that discussion in terms of zoning for alcohol establishments on the table as well.
It might be beneficial if we could get something from the city attorney as the law on licensing alcohol establishments. I believe local governments have a great deal of discretion in granting and denying the applications, but there have to be certain standards. I don't, just for particularly Commissioner Warbington and Commissioner Young and myself, I have not just generally familiar with it, but I think that would help us in going forward. The one thing I'm looking at this, Commissioner Warbington, I can't make out these streets. Obviously, I'm seeing one business. The gray is commercial, isn't that correct?
So coming from the movie theater, you got Julia, Benjamin, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got Baldwin that goes by Baldwin Park. That's kind of the limit of it. Mm-hmm. Then part of Florence, Lucille. Those are just some of the names off the top of my head, even though you may not can read it on the map there.
Okay, I might be missing something, but obviously the blue is residential, correct?
Well, it's zone CR. We're trying to rezone it residential. What it would make it become orange. You can kind of see the pink, orange down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're trying to extend into that area to make it purely residential.
But I mean, the different colors indicate whether it's a commercial structure or residential, right?
Well, and then there's different commercial. There's a C6 and a CR and C3. I mean, there's, the colors are, but the red candy cane hatched mark, that's the area that currently is CR that we're proposing to go to R2.
Okay. All right. I was just trying to distinguish what this kind of greenish gray color is, and the tan, and then the pink. But yeah, that's,
Well, pink is C3, the tan is C6, and then the mauve color in the bottom left, that's the Mary Acres residential area. That's R2.
okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions or discussions on that item? Thank you, Commissioner Worthington. Next, Madam Clerk.
Albany Transit Safety Plan.
I think, is Mr. Hamilton on the line?
Yes, sir, I am.
Good morning, Mr. Hamilton.
Good morning. Okay, we're asking the board to consider the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan for Albany Transit. The plan was developed by Georgia Department of Transportation in coordination with Albany Transit and risk management staff. The safety plan was developed to meet Federal Transit Administration requirements. The intent of the plan is to show a commitment to system safety. This item will be on the June 23rd regular meeting agenda for decision.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Mayor Pro Tem? Mr. Fuller?
No, sir.
Ms. Fletcher? Commissioner Worthington?
No, nothing.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
And just for the benefit of the public, Mr. Hamilton, this is a condition of receiving funding from the FTA. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And how often do you have to update your safety plan?
This plan will be updated as you see fit. Each agency will, if you have any changes that come about during a given year, you would update it as needed.
And generally, what changes, if any, do you have in this revised plan?
Well, this is the first year of the plan, but typically, after the first year, you would see what your trends are. So you may make some changes, maybe to a route or something of that nature,
okay,
to improve your safety.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. And we'll take this up next week. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Public Administration and Finance Matters, purchase customer-facing portal.
Okay. Mr. Carter, is Mr. Carter going to speak on this item? You want to take my chair, Mr. Carter?
No, sir. I think.
Oh, we can hear you? Okay.
I think Ms. Fields may want to do the introduction on this, but I can take it up at any point.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Fields.
We're asking you to consider for approval this item with the customer-facing portal. It was presented to the utility board and approved last month. This is for the portal for, it's an AMI project, portion of the project. It was approved in the AMI budget, but as a condition of the AMI approvals, we were instructed to bring back every contract for commission approval, and that's why we're here today. The initial expenditure would be $225,000, and Mr. Carter will take it from here.
Good morning, Mayor, Commission, City Manager. This particular item is for a customer-facing portal so that our citizens and our customers have an opportunity to participate in a robust view of our AMI project. This portal will be the aggregate spot for all of the AMI vendors and our customer information system, currently, which is Banner, and we're transitioning to Munis. This portal will be the one-stop shop for all the information concerning a customer's utility. That is where they would go to view information about their account. They'll be able to request services about that account. They'll be able to pay their utility bills. They'll be able to look at the history of their usage. It's just a very robust portal that brings together all the different features of the AMI project and the Munis project into one place to keep the customers from having to go to multiple sites to get that information. We're just aggregating all that information into one spot. That's the high level view of that. And I entertain any questions that you may have about the project.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Mayor Pro Tem? Mr. Fuller?
No, sir.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Worthington?
Yeah, Mr. Carter. So basically, this will take the place of our current. So as utility customers have been, there's various ways to go online and pay. This will be what they see and what they interact with.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, did we receive multiple bids, or was this a single source contract?
Actually, this is a combination of quite a bit of work that we've done. Most of the vendors that we have already dealt with have a portal that they offer, but none of those vendors offered a portal that would aggregate all the rest of the vendors into one. So this is a result of the work we've done to go out and search for the vendor that could interact with all of those different AMI and CIS vendors and make one product out of all of it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
The only question I have, do you have any idea of the cost savings that this particular item would bring?
Unfortunately, sir, this is not going to be a cost savings for us. This is going to be a cost of doing business for us, and it is going to be something that we feel is going to be a much better benefit to our customers. There's no cost replacement for this. However, it is a benefit in the result that it's going to do a lot more or provide a lot more functionality to our customers.
And also, is there I guess a smartphone component to it? There, an app that, because most of our customers generally do a lot of things on their smartphones. So that's taking care of that.
Absolutely, sir. Everything that we will introduce in our future will have that smartphone component to it. We realize that is a major means of communication with our customers and matter of fact, with everybody today. So everything that we incorporate, even in our future, this and anything else in our future, we'll always make sure that there's a smartphone component so that they can interact using their devices.
All right. Thank you, sir, Mr. Carter. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
And yeah, just to point out, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Carter, this first year expenditure includes expenses that one-time expenses. And
yes,
we
sir.
see that's $225,000, but the annual fee will be $55,000.
Yes, sir, going forward.
And that fee you're paying to Milestone for using their technology. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Okay. And this item, I mean, the funding was included in the 20.8 million for the project. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Any further questions, Mr. Carter? Thank you, Mr. Carter.
You're very welcome.
One more thing, Mayor. How close are we to getting the, I guess, the meter box project done? 'Cause I thought there was some connection between us getting the meter boxes out to the public and what the capability was going to be in terms of using this software, where people can, kind of gauge their utility usage with the software as well.
I will have to let Mr. Norman speak to you about where we are as far as replacing meters, but I actually think we're in the infant stages of that project. I'll defer to Mr. Jimmy Norman if he's available.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Norman. Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Young, we are in the first article testing part of the AMI project. We bring a small portion of each and every type meter on our system in and go through a series of tests. As these meters are tested, we put them in the system. We have about 13 electric meters in the system currently. They are all on City of Albany accounts, just so we can make sure that the communications devices and readings are reporting properly. The next step, starting in July, will be a pilot phase where we install a full route of meters that will consist of a combination of electric, gas, and water, with a total of about 2,000 to 2,500 meters. They will go through a testing phase between now and the end of this calendar year. Providing that all that goes as planned and everything works properly, then starting in January, we'll initiate the full deployment and start installing meters on all accounts.
Okay, and do you have a time frame for completion? Because I guess with what, this particular request is from Mr. Carter goes hand in hand with that particular project, especially for citizens who are, going to be looking for the benefit, in implementing this stuff. And I think one of the biggest benefits that my constituents want to see is an ability to, gauge their utilities, because there's a lot of, mistrust in what we're charging for utilities. One side of town thinks they're being charged more than the other side. So I think it's imperative that, as soon as we can, to go ahead and get citizens and customers the information they need so they can, feel better about the bill they're getting in their mailbox every month.
Yes, sir. That is the reason we're bringing Milestone to you now. As we install the meters, they will automatically be uploaded and be able to see the functions of Milestone and be able to utilize all the functions that it brings to the table. The process of the entire project is expected to be completed in 24 months.
Okay, it's 2022, so to speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But Commissioner Young, Mr. Carter, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a situation where if at my residence we had a $800 bill in July, with this technology, you could access on your smartphone on the 7th day of the month, you could see that you had utilized X amount of wattage and that the bill is $150 for those 7 days. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure that there's going to be a money component in there. That may be something that we have to adjust, but you will be able to see your consumption. Now, we do have rates available on our website that you can convert that consumption to dollars, but you will be able to see what your consumption is day by day.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's really important and beneficial, because sometimes when people contact you about exorbitant bills, it's in the hottest months of the year, and people will tell you, well, I was out of town for a week, and it could have been that they left the air on 70 degrees the whole time they were out. And of course, if that person is out of town, you still have access to what's going on in their residence. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, what we can do, one of the things that this new system will allow you to do is set some triggers for yourself, so that, if you have a, excuse me, if you want to set a threshold for consumption, it will alert you when you get to that threshold, so that you won't get surprised at the end of the month with a large bill.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Also, Mr. Mayor, I think what I was told was it also allows you, will allow Albany Utilities to have a prepaid component where people could actually, pay $100 if that's what they had to put on their utilities, and every day they would get a notification that, okay, you used so much of that $100. That's what Mitchell EMC is operating on now. And I had asked before, and they said, well, once we get these new meters in and the new system in, people will be allowed to have that type of setup on their accounts.
Yes, sir. Prepay is going to be a function of the new system. However, the milestone portal that we're asking for today is not that prepaid portion.
Okay, but that goes along with the utility meter stuff.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Ms. Kelly, could you read the next item, please, ma'am?
B1 sewer budget amendment.
Okay, Mr. Brown speaks to this item, I think.
Yes, sir. This is an agenda item to finalize the fiscal 20 budget for the work Constantine Engineering is doing. This was originally presented last year in February to the utility board and they in turn recommended that the city contract with Constantine, and the full board of commissioners approved that on February 26th rather of last year. And at that point, what was approved was a unit price contract. And so from that contract, 2 task orders were issued, 2 scopes of work, and a portion of that was done last year. $394,509 was done in the prior year and covered under last year's budget. But $156,708 of that first task order rolled over into this fiscal year. And the second task order wasn't actually, a purchase order wasn't issued until this fiscal year, which amounted to $1,065,848. And so we know the maximum amount that we would spend in this fiscal year. And so we're asking for approval of the Utilities Board recommendation to amend the budget in the amount of $1,222,556.
We couldn't hear the mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
No question.
Mr. Fuller.
So we're asking to amend this, I guess, the budget that we're currently in, because it rolled over to from the previous year's budget.
That is correct. Most of it was actually in this year's budget, but there is a small amount that would roll over from last year. But the bulk of it, the second purchase order and task order, didn't happen until July 23rd. And so that's actually in the current year's budget. And so we know that the current purchase order that exists will not have any additions to it, no changes. And so we know what that fixed amount would be, as far as what the maximum amount would be, is what's on those 2 purchase orders at this moment. And so that's what we're asking to amend in the current year budget.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher. Commissioner Warburton.
Yeah, so the 1.2 million, was there any money in the budget for the Constantine study?
No, sir.
Why was that?
Well, we didn't have a fixed amount. We knew what the task order, we knew what the unit price was. We knew the contract amounts with hourly rates based on individuals performing the job, but we did not have a task order at the time when we adopted the budget. We did not know what it was. We didn't know that until that purchase order was issued in July, which of course was after the fiscal year had started. I think there have been a couple of changes and adjustments to that since then. So we did not know a fixed amount at the time.
So at a minimum, we knew $200,000 was rolling over. I guess I'm struggling with doing a budget amendment for every dollar that's left, and there was no amount. And so I guess when I went back and looked at the budget, looks like sanitary sewer had 1.5 million budgeted for capital projects. I don't know, is this considered a capital project?
No, sir.
So it would be under tech services, or what line item under sewer would this be under?
Well, this one isn't in there. So you could qualify it as either technical services or professional services. So either one, this would probably be more technical services, 7512.
Okay. And this dollar amount never came back to the commission. I guess this is the first time this number has been brought to the public.
Yes, sir. Outside of the utility board, that is correct.
Okay. I would just, I just have a lot of concerns with that amount of money and for nothing to be in the budget. And we're getting ready to finalize their study. And I guess, or we're indicating that we're getting ready to pay them their final bill. Have they completed the work? Is anything going to roll into next fiscal year?
No, I don't anticipate anything in the next fiscal year. We have not paid them all of this. Of the 1.6 million, we paid 1.2, so we still owe them additional funding, I think, and there is still work to be done. I have to defer to Mr. Stock or Maples for specifics, but they have not completed the task.
Okay, that's it.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
I have a lot of concerns about this. I think this separating the stormwater and the sewage is probably the biggest issue that we've addressed in the last 6 months, and we've understandably lost sight of it because of other pressing matters. But I find the report to be unsatisfactory. I cannot believe we cannot accomplish the separation for less than whatever the $230 million figure is. I think we need to have another engineer look at this plan and see if it can be done with less expense. What I am just frightened about is that the city commission, as it's constituted presently, and our people that succeed us in these positions are going to do what the city commission has done for, I know, 20 years. This Holloway Basin, I think in one SPLOST there was $10 million allocated, and that money was just transferred to one project or another because engineering said, well, we can't do it for this. We have to, but it was a disservice to the people that live in that area. We knew it was a problem. And what I'm afraid we're going to do is say, well, we don't have the kind of money it's going to take to proceed with this project, so we're going to reallocate this somewhere else. There's going to be a need to obtain funding, hopefully from the federal government. We're going to have to raise rates. There's no question about that to address this situation. But I certainly feel like this report needs to be redrafted, and we need other alternatives. I mean, I think I'm dissatisfied that the board was not apprised of what was going on during the process. I mean, really what's happened, as far as my understanding, we get this report, $230 million, now it's write us a check for 1.5 and we're out of here. That ain't the way to run a railroad. And I hear Mr. Brown say there's still work to be done. Mr. Brown, will we get another bill after this from Constantine?
No, nothing that would exceed the existing purchase orders. It would not exceed those numbers, no.
Okay,
we
so
have not paid it all yet. So we will still get subsequent bills because we have not paid it all yet.
So if there's still work to be done, why are we paying them for work that needs to be done?
So we're paying them as they do the work. You know, as they submit invoices, work that has been completed, and that's reviewed by engineering, and we're paying after the work has been done.
Well, I mean, maybe we ain't on the same page. I thought you said that there was still work to be done on this project.
Yes, there is still work to be done.
Okay, and are these, you call them purchase orders, I would call them bills. Are these the last bills we're going to get from Constantine?
No, we still have a few bills. The purchase order represents the total amount that we could spend. And as they perform work, then we're sort of billed as work is done, perhaps
okay, so what's the figure of how much they have billed to date?
We have paid them $1,246,592 is what we have paid them to date.
And how much are they asking for today?
Well, this is just the approval to put a final number in our budget. They're not asking for anything today. We're trying to finalize this inside of our budget, sort of really an accounting piece, as far as we did not have a number in our budget at the beginning of the fiscal year because we did not know what that number would be. We sort of have a final number now. We know what that number will be, or at least worst case scenario. And so we're just asking to put that in the budget. Sure, there will be, worst case, we will get bills up to $370,000 for the remainder of this fiscal year. That would be, if we maxed out the purchase orders, then that's what's left on those purchase orders is $370,000.
Okay.
So this is no payment. This is just budgeting.
This is just budgeting. That's correct.
Okay. Well, Mr. Brown, you're here as the finance director, but as the mayor, I want to get some control over what Constantine has done. I want some options other than what we saw in this draft report. And I understand now that's not your item here today, but it's something we need to do to find out how we can separate the stormwater and the sanitary sewer, and if we can do it for less than this $235 million, and if we can do it in shorter time than 20 years, because I mean, I just, and whatever we need to do, if it needs to be Mr. Maples to get with these folks, but I don't want to keep paying them to keep working on some report that they're building Disneyland, and that ain't what we need. You know, if it is what we need, then I think another firm could look at it and tell us these are the appropriate recommendations.
Mr. Mayor, can I interject a comment here, please?
Yeah, Mr. Stock.
Yeah, thank you. So we are meeting with Constantine this afternoon for them to deliver the model, which is one of the major deliverables in the study. And we are also meeting with them to discuss some of the options that you're discussing about how do we come up with options that are a little less pricey than the ones in the original report.
I appreciate that. But I think we should have done that a long time ago.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
Mr. Stock, so one of the large cost items of this was the model that you referenced. Is that model going to be the city's property, or will we be constantly engaging Constantine with this model ongoing, or is the model being given to us so that we can have the model and take and change variables, take this, that's what the model is for. Is that the city's property?
Yes, sir. Great question. The model will be the city's property, and we will use that model to run different scenarios. Actually, to the mayor's point, to try to find those different options where we can implement less cost, solutions, but still accomplish the overall goal.
Yeah, and Mayor, I would address what you said as well. I met with Mr. Stock and Constantine probably for 2 hours or 3 hours. We had a long meeting, and that was the takeaway was we asked very specifically for options, plan A, plan B, plan C. What they presented to the commission was, I guess, their recommendation, but there are other options of how to get the work done. And one of the focus that I really was pushing them was the separation, separation, and it's going to really impact a lot of neighborhoods, and primarily in Commissioner Fletcher's ward, because most of the neighborhoods are right there around Slappy on the avenues and some in Commissioner Fuller's ward. But we're going to really disrupt people's lives. So part of it is cost, part of it is the engineering, but then we're going to be in people's front yards, their streets for periods of time, and that's some of the stuff that we need to consider. But that is an option, and we need to be able to have that on paper of how aggressive do we want to disrupt our neighborhoods while we do this. They had a proposal that was less disruptive, if you will, and so really those options need to be presented to us so that we can make that decision. If we want to put the full pedal to the metal to separate, then that's an option, but there's consequences to that. If we want to have a 20-year approach of separation, and we bring in a chlorinator, dechlorinator, and that's some of the cost that's in there, then we need to be able to evaluate, do we want to take that kind of approach? So anyway, so I think from our meeting, I haven't seen what the options were, Mr. Stock, but I was looking forward to seeing what those various options were.
Well, I certainly understand it's a monumental task. It's been explained to me that we're talking about basically tearing up portions of most streets where the sewer runs, and then you have to make accommodation for the utilities, the phone lines, and everything else. But I keep going back to a meeting, and the city of Columbus did a very similar project in the early 90s, and the figure was $95 million. I know that was how many ever years ago, but I would think the city of Columbus would have probably a bigger system, but I just.
Mayor,
Yes,
may I address something?
Yes, sir.
This is Bruce Maples. Just for clarification, the 234 million that's been presented kind of goes back to what Commissioner Young said earlier about the issues about not funding the sewer system in the past and delaying things. So a lot of the costs that we're showing in the report have to do with the sewage treatment plant and other aspects that are totally separate from the combination sewer separation. And then in response to what you just said, we've contacted the city engineer for Columbus and the vice president of engineering for the Columbus Water Works. They're trying to get us some money, but just off the initial conversation that I've had with them, the 95 million was one aspect of it. They have said that by no means are they totally separated, that they still have issues. The other problem is that they said some of their costs they just can't pull out because they were associated with sales tax projects associated with the riverfront, streetscapes, and other things. They're trying to assemble some of those dollar figures for us so that we can get a better picture of how much they spent over a 26-year period. They have allocated most of their money for the funding of the separation through their SPLOST program. We're trying to assemble that information to give you a better understanding of what Columbus did, but they have indicated that it was like a 26-year program, that they're still not separated. They don't mean to try to pull the wool over people's eyes and think that they are totally separated. But they have made a great effort over a 26-year period, but they're trying to get that information. I'll be glad to provide it to you when we get that information from the city of Columbus.
If I'm making a statement that's not correct, I certainly apologize for that. But I still feel that we need to confirm that this project can't be completed for less money in a shorter period of time. But one thing I could say, I try to read the information we get provided from staff. I went through that draft plan, and it was very difficult for me to process all that, Mr. Maples. I mean, what you're saying now, I understand, but I think it would be beneficial for us to sort of have a cliff notes, maybe, of what's in that plan. I mean, I do see in there that they were talking about, Mr. Warburton just talked about chlorinators, but it seemed like small plants along the way. And the Joshua treatment plant, what's the condition there? All this is something we need to understand, and quite frankly, it's very difficult for me, and I got a college education to get through that that plan. So if we could get, like I say, some cliff notes or an executive summary, that would be helpful for me.
Okay, we'll be glad to do that. Just like we met with Commissioner Warburton for 2 to 3 hours, we'd be glad to spend whatever time is necessary to try to explain it, because it is a world of information. It is difficult for some engineering people to understand it sometimes, but it's been going on since the 1900s, the early 1900s, and it's a lot of data. It's a lot of data to take in. So we'd be glad to get you anything you need to help you with that effort.
Thank you, sir.
Any
Yeah, I
other
would like
questions or
to-
comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
Mr. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
You say you got a meeting with Constantine representative this afternoon.
Yes, sir, we do.
Would you be able to provide us the data of the discussion before next Tuesday?
I can give you a summary of the meeting after the meeting. Yes, sir, I can do that.
Okay, appreciate it.
Ms. Fuller? Ms. Fuller?
Mr. Fuller,
No, sir, no questions.
Commissioner Fletcher.
You know, if you look at Ward 2 and 3, we have, if I'm not mistaken, I think Ward 6 has the most land, but we have the most businesses and homes in our areas. And whereas I know 5 or 6 years ago when we looked at this, Mayor, we were given an estimate of around 100 million. Now we're well over double that. And it is an urgency. I mean, it might be an inconvenience. We are going to have to do it in sections, but I am constantly going to people's homes and businesses where the clay pipes have busted, where the roots are going up through their system, where their sewer is backing up through their toilets, where it's going through their laundromats, where it's going through their businesses. And, you know, I am like you. We can start on this, or we can continue sort of just talking about it. It seems like I know the 5 years I've been here, we've done a minute little bit of work on it. And I do feel like we are at a point now to where maybe even the country is taking infrastructure serious, and we could get low loans, you know, at very little cost. But it's I don't think it is a serious issue, and I absolutely appreciate you bringing it up today, because this to me is one of the things, Commissioner Fuller and I have talked about it. It's a continual kick in the can down the road, and it's going to have to be picked up, and we have the people and the staff that can do this. We just need to have a serious conversation on means, and we don't have to do the 235. I can't believe there's somewhere along the lines, there's not something that we can start on to start showing these people infrastructure is huge for the future of this community and any other community. And it's just time that we pick this can up and start doing something. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Warmington,
I don't have anything else.
Commissioner Langstaff,
Nothing else.
Commissioner Young.
Yeah, I was just going to say I would like to be in on those discussions that the mayor had mentioned. There is work that's already being done down here in South Albany on South Jackson that's causing, you know, a lot of kind of upheaval in those neighborhoods where those big pipes, we have a big, I think Mr. Maples can say, I don't know if it's a pumper station or something, basically blocking half of the road into the neighborhoods. So I would like to see a little bit more, at least for that area, a little bit more information flow to the citizens, because I'm getting calls like, you know, how long is this going to be here? You know, we got big, you know, pipes running right down the street, and sometimes water is flowing out of them. People don't know if it's a water main break or what's going on. So just more information for the residents down here off South Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Maples. Next item on the agenda, Ms. Kelly.
Excuse me, engineering budget amendment.
I think we've been through that, haven't we?
This is a second one, Mayor. This is a second amendment. It's very similar to the first one we just looked at. This one is related to work that was initiated last year as a result of damage from Hurricane Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Commissioner Brown. Mr. Brown, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, no problem. And so last year, in January of last year, the board approved to do work with area-wide protective to do sign repairs for us. Then in May 14th, 2019, There was work, signal repair was approved by the board. And so last year we thought we would get some of this work done, but we did not get any expenses billed last year. And so the full amount of those purchase orders, one is $966,713. The other is $356,000. 75% at a minimum will be reimbursable. And so we're asking to amend the budget for that total amount because none of those dollars were spent last year, even though we had that, even amended the budget last year, just in case we had some of that. We did not know how much would get expensed, but none of it did. So we're asking to amend the budget for engineering this year for that full amount of those purchase orders of $1,322,713.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions? Mr. Fuller?
No, sir.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Warbington?
All right, so both of these purchase orders were issued last fiscal year, and no dollar amount was in the budget for a purchase order that was issued last fiscal year. I guess I'm trying to understand, and it seems like, I guess I'm always asking this question, whether it's the fire truck purchase or we issue a PO in 1 year, and why is the money not carrying forward? I don't know. Help me understand why this wasn't in the budget.
Well, because it was in last year's budget, we actually had to amend the budget, and we did that for many Hurricane Michael expenses because at the time you just don't know what those expenses are going to be. And so we did not know at the end of the fiscal year how much of this work would get done before the end of the fiscal year. So we erred on the side of amending the budget for the full amount. And so last year, this money was in last year's budget. But by the time the fiscal year ended, we didn't know how much of that money would be moved or need to be carried forward. And so now that we've gotten toward the end of this fiscal year, we know that the entire amount needs to be included in this year's budget. And we did not know that at the end of fiscal year 19. We did not know that amount, what that number would be.
And I get the uncertainty, but not to move a dollar forward just doesn't, it seems like maybe half of it or a majority of it or something to kind of get us partially there. I just don't understand another example of not even planning for a dollar amount for work that's already started, a purchase order that's issued. People are working on things, but then we don't have any dollar amount in the budget. So I just have a concern with that.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
No, nothing, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other question? Any other comments you had, Mr. Brown?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
Other public admin and finance matters. Number 1, health care cost comparison study.
I've asked for the this item to be on the agenda. It might be somewhat premature. What the issue is it's my understanding that our healthcare costs in Albany are higher than any place in the Southeast United States. If you look at the Chamber of Commerce over there, they will tell you about agribusiness and that kind of thing. Well, I believe the history of this town, what made Albany distinctive in Southwest Georgia was it had a strong industrial base. If you went through the businesses that we have lost in the last 30 years, I was writing down Jameson Bedding, McGregor Golf, Merck & Company, Delco Remy, Firestone, later Cooper Tire, Bob's Candies. If we want to improve the quality of living for our citizens, we need to have the ability to attract industry. Everybody talks about economic development. The truth of the matter is, if you've got the highest healthcare costs in the Southeast United States, that is a great obstacle to economic development. And what I think we need is a healthcare study. And the cost of this study is going to be significant. I talked to a fellow, Dr. Capps. He's with Bates White in Washington, D.C. I think he's got his doctorate from University of Chicago. His figure was $250,000. Why would it cost that much? He said, because, well, we'll get staff to get this information instead of me speaking to it. But I just want to initiate this process. I think we should ask the county commission, the school board, and even the hospital authority to join in this expense. With an objective, accurate study, we'll have the information. And the folks at the hospital will have to address and confront that issue. Now, I know what we're going to hear. We provide this much in indigent care. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you study healthcare economics, who pays for indigent care? People who have private insurance pay for people who are indigent. And it is very complex. If you remember this fellow, Mr. Veazey, when there was a presentation objecting to the proposed hospital in Lee County, he basically came and said that we don't have enough privately insured people to support the hospital if it has any competition. That is a very, very poor argument in my opinion. But what we need to do is think about how can we get more people insured. And you do that by creating economic opportunity. This is an enormous issue in this community. And that's why I have proposed that we pursue this healthcare study. And obviously, if the majority of the commission is unwilling to participate in the study, there's no sense in asking the county commission and the school board and the hospital authority to participate. But what I'm talking about is an objective study where nobody's calling the consultants. The numbers are going to be what the numbers are. And what's going to be important is not only the charges for the local hospital and medical providers, but what private insurers pay as opposed to what those insurers pay in other markets. The reason for this, getting back to what I said initially, we have to create an environment that is attractive to industry. And if we have the highest healthcare costs in the Southeast United States, we will continue to have a problem. We will continue to struggle with economic development. And like I say, when you look back at the history of this town, what made Albany unique in Southwest Georgia was you had a strong industrial base. I did not mention that we still have Miller Coors, we still have P&G. We are fortunate to have these employers. But if you will recall, back in the 2000s, businesses, a consortium of businesses expressed concern about the cost of health care for their employees. And one of those businesses, Cooper Tire, is no longer with us. And when they announced their closure, high health care costs was one of the factors identified in the motivating the decision to close. So with that, I would like to hear what the other commissioners say. And like I say, if we don't have the will to go forward with it, there's no sense in trying to recruit other entities. But I believe this is a crucial issue for our community. And with that, Mayor Pro Tem, any comments?
Mr. Mayor, I agree with you on majority of it. I think that we do need a study to compare the cost of healthcare in Southwest Georgia and other cities compared to our side. Because like I said, it's been a number of years since we had a study. So I think we need to go back out because the medical field has changed, healthcare have changed, and other things have changed. And certainly we can say that if we survive this coronavirus, that we need to make sure we get the best bang for our dollar.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Commissioner Fuller.
Yes, sir. I'd be open to hearing more information about that and how that process would work in determining the company that would provide that and the cost of it. But I'd be interested in the staff looking further into it.
Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher?
Well, yes, Mayor, I'd like to look at that. Plus, I would like for us to, and I'll give you a quick reason on why. I'd like for us to look at our insurance that we have insurance with. And I say that because lately I've been looking at bills and, you know, under the impression that if I pay X amount of dollars, you know, there would be nothing for a year later to get a bill, go ask why I got that bill. And it was because our Blue Cross Blue Shield didn't pay what they said they were going to pay. I mean, and I really don't know a whole lot of it, but if we could not only look at what you're asking, let's take a hard look at what our provider's doing, because I think there's going to be two parts of this, and you are absolutely right. To again, talking about infrastructure earlier and all of this is what people look for to bring their companies here. But if we could combine it, I would be a part of saying yes, if we can look at both issues. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, for me, it would just be important to get the county and school system, like you said. It would be hard to think about it if we were doing it on our own, but we may be the only one. But yeah, I would like to get the cost and what's involved and try to get other people on board with us.
Commissioner Langstaff?
I'd just like to know the cost. I mean, that you were talking about staff would get together.
Yeah, I think, well, it's pretty complex as you can imagine. Just talking to Dr. Capps, you're talking, I mean, it would require them to, whoever does the research, to go through hundreds of thousands of documents and bills, and it's quite involved. Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. I wouldn't be opposed to a study, but I would, you know, make the caveat that, you know, of course, this is a national issue, and it's also an issue that you know, surrounds healthcare expansion in general, and that's specifically Medicaid expansion. We know that, you know, at the national level, that can was kicked down the road, or you know, in a lot of ways, sabotage to, you know, for, you know, seemingly just political purposes. And you know, the last healthcare CEO here supported that, along with a lot of other people in the community, in terms of Medicaid expansion, because, you know, not only do we need industry, but we do need, you know, a healthy community that provides those workers. But when we see the health outcomes and that our county is at the bottom of the barrel in terms of those health outcomes, then that also has an effect on whether industry wants to locate here. So I would also want to look at the problem from that angle as well. Both of those are very important in this healthcare debate, whether or not we have Medicaid expansion and also the healthcare costs.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. I was involved in a webinar over the weekend about that Medicaid expansion came up, and one issue was that throughout the nation, prior to the Affordable Care Act, 15%, roughly 15% of Americans were uninsured, and with the ACA, known as Obamacare, it has been reduced to about 8.5%, and 14 states, 7 of whom are which are in the Southeast United States, rejected the Affordable Care Act. And of course, the number of insured in the state of Georgia, uninsured in the state of Georgia, it remains at 15%, and that is the third highest in the country behind Texas and Oklahoma. So I think that's a little bit above our pay grade, but certainly the legislature needs to reconsider that, because if you can basically reduce in half the number of people who are uninsured, that would be a positive development. But with that, Madam City Clerk, can we start the process of putting together a request for proposal? Or? I'm sorry, what'd I say? Well, can Ms. Kelly start? Okay. I meant to say, Ms. Subadan, can we start the process?
Yes, sir. We'll move forward.
Thank you. And is that the last item on the agenda, or is, okay, next, oh, I'm sorry, City Manager's update is next.
Thank you, Mayor. As is customary now, I will email you an update of projects, but we did start our reopening yesterday. By count of directors, everything went smoothly yesterday, and we're happy to start to re-engage. Phase 2 will be next week. It appears that the courts are going to be pushed further out, but we will start to reopen city facilities in conjunction with the county next week to re-engage our public on a gradual basis. And then the last phase will be how we provide direct services to our community, and with the various guidelines to continue to avoid a resurgence of COVID-19 in our community. And yesterday also we re-engaged baseball practices, where parks were reopened, so the little people can get out and start to engage in some activity, which I'm sure everybody's excited about that. And but we're taking it one step at a time. The statistics in our community look incredibly good. Great report from Phoebe again last night of no admissions for several days. So we are optimistic that we're moving in the right direction. So that's all I have. Everything else will be in my written report.
Thank you, ma'am. Items for next agenda, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. City Manager, at our next meeting, can you provide for us that, I don't know what we say, but that those community ambassadors, what are their duties and the area that they usually monitor?
The community safety officer?
Right.
Yes, we can bring you an update. It will be on the first work session in July.
Okay. Okay, and it will also include what the areas are they usually riding through or patrolling?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Fuller?
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Worthington?
Nothing.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing.
Commissioner Young?
You're
Commissioner
muted,
Young?
Commissioner Young. Your mute button is on, Commissioner Young.
I'm sorry, nothing for new agenda items.
Okay, for myself, the one item, we need to rescind that resolution recommending people shelter in place. That's kind of inconsistent with the city reopening. And I think that in view of the positive developments we've seen with the hospital, that needs to be rescinded. If we could put that on the as a conditional item for next Tuesday, I don't think anybody will take issue with that. The second item, I would like to see from staff how much money has been allocated to Chehaw in all of the SPLOST. I think SPLOST 3 was when they got the $6 million. But if I could get that, I'd appreciate it. And then I apologize. Can you hear me? I apologize. One item I should have asked, we were talking about the budget. Chief personally told me with 90 body cameras, he'd have enough cameras to provide every officer on patrol. And that is one thing in these webinars I've been participating in. mayors, the mayor from Tampa, who city manager knows from her time down there, that used to be a police officer, was very supportive of police cameras, because what she said is, while we can see horrific things like what happened on Memorial Day in Minneapolis, more often than not, we find that the complainant's account of things is incomplete or even inaccurate, and the officer can be vindicated. But of course, the other thing is that we all understand that if the officer has a video camera, that might be something that convinces him or her to engage in de-escalation, where he or she might be provoked. And one thing I want to say is, my sympathies and support are with law enforcement. I know these people frequently come into contact with the public. I've been rude to police officers when I've been pulled over, no excuse for it. Sometimes officers are even insulted, and occasionally they're physically threatened. They have a difficult job, and I'm not trying to make it any more difficult for police officers, but I think this is one means that could probably help address the concerns we see in our community and across the nation. And if I could get that number of what it would cost, I know it's late in the budget process, but I think we need to discuss that. And I apologize to Mr. Brown and the city manager for not addressing that when we were in the budget. But I frankly forgot about it.
Can I respond?
Commissioner Fletcher.
She's on mute. I can't hear her.
Okay.
Can't hear her.
Can I respond, Mayor?
I didn't hear y'all. What Commissioner Fletcher
Hey,
said.
y'all, we got like 5 cameras. So BJ didn't have Commissioner Fletcher didn't have her microphone, so she's speaking, and if the video folks can, yeah, I know. So
And I'll let the mayor repeat what I said, but
Still can't hear her.
okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just think that we're at the point in time where we can't afford not to have cameras. And I think that is, I would love to see that added to this year's budget. And I'd like to see taking what Ms. Glass said and what the chief said about a counselor, maybe we could even possibly look at what it would cost to have a couple of counselors on hand with this. And I think it would make the public feel better. It would make our officers feel better. So I absolutely agree if we could get that cost and get it in there. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Any other items of business?
Can I respond? Am I muted?
Yes,
Or am
yes,
I
ma'am.
being- Or are you just ignoring me? So you'll be happy to know that the 90 cameras are in the budget. We have a SPLOST line item for policing. And we were able to coordinate a proposal from Motorola for license plate reader cameras and body cameras in one package. And the SPLOST line item is for technology improvements in the police department. So I'm pretty certain that is already in the budget.
Excellent.
Wait, you need to say that again. I'm sorry. Could you say that one more time?
Excellent.
Thank you. We got you covered.
Any other business? With that, we stand adjourned.
Executive session.
Hold on.
Special call.
Yeah, we have a special call.
Okay, well, the work session is adjourned. The next item is a special call meeting. Oh, do I have the agenda for that? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. The special call, Ms. Kelly, you want to read that? I'm sorry. Hang on.
June 12th, 2020, dear Mayor and Commissioners, there will be a special call City Commission virtual meeting on Tuesday, June 16th at 10 a.m., time approximate, immediately following the work session. The purpose of the meeting is for the Mayor and Board of Commissioners to discuss and or approve the following resolutions. 1, approving a modification in Albany Holding LLC's note on February 4, 2004 in favor of the City of Albany, authorizing the city manager to execute the modification, promissory note, and strict compliance agreement. Number 2, authorizing the director of DCED to obtain deferment of principal portion of annual August 1st, 2020 payment due to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, regarding Albany Holdings LLC Section 108 loans. Sincerely, Sharon D. Subadan, Manager. And it was signed by Mayor Dura and Commissioner Wormington, and the commissioners were notified via email on 14th.
Madam City Manager?
Thank you, Ms. Kelly and the Mayor. You'll recall that we had a discussion about requesting a deferment of our 108 loan with HUD, and we've also received a request from Hilton Garden Inn to defer their payments for 6 months. At the time of the discussion, they were in arrears. They have now come into compliance and paid off their arrears. And so what is in front of you today is a request to allow us to move forward with the application to HUD for the deferment of the 108 loan, and also a request to grant Albany Holdings, the owner of Hilton Garden Inn, a 6-month deferment, which I believe would begin in April of 20, which would push their payments out from April. Their next payment due would be in October of 2020. And on this, we would need a vote of the board. It's a resolution. So we would have to ask for somebody to move the resolution and ask for its adoption on the first item. And also another motion for a resolution to adopt the second one.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions? Commissioner Fuller.
I guess, and I don't know if we'll get into this in a minute, but I don't know if we could do an alternate motion on the second one about approving a 3-month deferment instead of a 6-month deferment.
Okay, I guess we can talk about it, but somebody needs to make a motion, and then that'd be a substitute motion. I guess you could make that motion originally. But
well, I'll make a substitute motion for the 3 months instead of 6.
Well, I don't think it'd be a substitute motion because we hadn't had the motion. So that's
okay. Well, we'll wait and see if anybody makes a motion for approval.
Okay. No, what I'm saying, Commissioner Fuller, if you wanted to make the motion, that would be the motion.
I see motion and not a substitute motion. So I do make the motion to for a 3-month deferment as opposed to a 6-month.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Could I hear his reason on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yes, Commissioner Fletcher asked if you could share your reasoning for the shorter time period.
Yes, I guess this is due to COVID, and that's been the kind of the thing that banks have done, and also that commercial landlords have done. So I feel that the 3-month deferment is in line with what's going on nationally.
Sorry, Commissioner, we didn't. get around the table before you made your motion. Can we continue with the discussion, or you want to
Sure, I'm fine
proceed
with
with the
continuing. I'm fine with continuing with the
discussion on your motion?
I'm fine with continuing discussion.
Sir?
Are y'all not able to hear me? I was saying I'm fine with continuing discussion if we want to continue discussion on the matter.
Commissioner Warburton?
Yes, Ms. Subadan. So for the if we did the 3 months, that would be for March, April, May payments.
I think it would actually be for April, May, June.
Okay. So then their next payment would be towards the end of the month of July, basically.
July.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Langstaff?
The deferral from HUD is for 6 months.
It's a year, isn't it?
It's a year. Because we normally make just one payment to HUD, and it's an annual payment.
Okay, then I'm fine with the 3 month deferral. We can always.
Young? I'm sorry.
If we had to.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, I think I could support the 3 month deferral.
Okay. Is that all?
Yes.
I would prefer to proceed with the second item. And I mean, I think it must be kind of pro forma, because if I remember from a previous presentation, staff had basically advised us that the federal government notified us of the option of requesting the deferment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, I mean, could we not just proceed with the to get the deferment from the federal government and then deal with Albany Holdings later? But we got to, that would have been my preference. So we have a motion. That would have been my preference, to get the deferment approved by HUD. And then after we had the deferment, we could deal with Albany Holdings. But we have a motion on the floor for discussion. Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. Commissioner Fuller?
No further discussion from me.
Commissioner Fletcher? Okay. Commissioner Warburton?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think we voted for it. I think it was under discussion. Okay. Commissioner Langstaff?
No further discussion.
Okay. Commissioner Young?
Let me understand your point again a little bit better, Mayor.
No, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I just thought if we would have, and it doesn't seem like HUD is going to deny the deferment, because they told us we offer you a year deferment. So I think it's just a pro forma thing that we have to request it. But what I was saying is, let's get the deferment from HUD. Let's take this in 2 stages. And then when HUD gives us the deferment, then we'll go back to Albany Holdings and consider their request. But that was...
Mayor, my only disagreement with that is I think these are 2 independent, at least for me. One doesn't lead. We can give them, Albany Holdings, a deferment, whether or not we ask or we accept the federal government. We can get the federal government. Doesn't matter whether we give. I don't think they're linked, in my opinion.
No, I understand that, but what I am saying is, if we took it in stages, if we got the deferment, then
that gives us room.
Yeah, it's but there again, it's probably academic, because point of fact, they told us you can get the deferment. So I don't. But with that, any further discussion, Commissioner?
To the Commissioner Fuller's point, where were you getting the information on the? You said that this is what banks did on a 3 month deal.
I think that was Commissioner Fuller instead of Commissioner Fletcher that was talking about.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's right. It was me, Commissioner Fuller. Just from my dealings in business with local business owners and business owners that I've talked to across the country, that's been the general term that banks and lenders have done, as well as that's the deferment that landlords have been asked, commercial landlords for, box retailers and that kind of thing. Across the board, it was pretty much a consensus of 90 days.
Okay. That's it, man.
Okay. Now, as I understand, the resolution, Commissioner Fuller has offered the resolution with the modification that this agreement with Albany Holdings LLC will be for 3 months as opposed to 6 months, and staff will be authorized to proceed with the request for deferment to be submitted to HUD. Is that correct, Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Fuller?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I didn't mistake that. Okay, we'll go around the table. Mayor Pro Tem. Commissioner Fuller?
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Warmington?
Yes.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Mayor votes yes. The substitute motion carries. And with that brings the special call meeting to a close. Am I wrong about that?
Mayor, did you combine both things into one? Because it's 2 resolutions. One was for the 108 and one was for Albany Holdings. It sounded like what you just passed was the substitute motion of a 3-month deferment for Albany Holdings, but could you take a separate vote to allow us to move forward with the request for the 1-year deferment from HUD?
Yeah, I'll offer the resolution, ask for its adoption for the HUD deferment loan.
Second, Commissioner Young, for the record. You got that, Ms. Skillen? Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. I think it'd be appropriate to go around the table, even though we've discussed it. Mayor Pro Tem, any discussion?
No.
Commissioner Fuller?
No discussion.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No discussion.
Commissioner Warmington?
No discussion.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No discussion.
Commissioner Young?
No discussion.
Call the vote. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Commissioner Fuller?
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher? Commissioner Warmington?
Yes.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Mayor votes yes. Motion carries. And that concludes the,
Go ahead. I mean, you in and whole meeting? Well, I was gonna ask for executive session first thing.
that concludes the special call meeting. I believe there's a executive session. Is that on the agenda next, Ms. Kelly? Ma'am?
You can't hear her.
Disposition and acquisition of real property.
Okay. Now, Mr. Davis, is that appropriate? I have closed the special call meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll go back to the,
Yeah, and now we open the executive session.
yes, and pursuant to, yes, and pursuant to the motion by Commissioner Fletcher, the topic would be personnel, not real estate.
Okay. Is there a second to go into executive session?
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. Commissioner Fuller?
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yes.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Do we not need to discuss real estate as well?
My understanding is that is no longer a topic. I could be corrected by the city manager, but that's my understanding.
We thought we would have had new information for you, but unless Chad has heard something different as of close of business yesterday, we had nothing new.
Okay, then I'm a yes. I just want to make sure before we went into executive session, we were going in for everything we needed to.
Mr. Young?
Yes, but how exactly are we achieving executive session in this format?
I think he's asking what is the logistics going to be?
I don't have the answer to that.
What I will suggest for you guys is, excuse me. What I suggest for you guys is that you retire to room 160. We have a conference phone there. I can send the conference credentials to those that are not present so that they can join the meeting with you.
Mr. Carter, is there anybody in the chamber? Well, I guess there are people who are in the chamber.
There's a lot of people on this meeting also.
Yeah, I was gonna say Zoom has a breakout room function, but if you got people in the room down there, then that's gonna present a challenge. You could actually pull the different broadcasts and put them in their own particular room, but you got people actually in the physical room, so.
Correct.
Never mind.
So that's what we'll do. We'll retire to the conference room. Is that agreeable?
That's my suggestion.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
All right, and Mr. Carter, you're going to send out a conference call number to call into?
Yes, sir. I'll text you, Mr. Langstaff, city manager. Is there anybody else that needs this information?
Commissioner Young.
Okay. All right. I'll have it out to you momentarily.
Thank you.